With a career spanning more than half a century, actor Martin Sheen is one of the country's most versatile Hollywood icons. After garnering worldwide recognition for his work in Apocalypse Now, Martin began to let his passion for political activism influence the roles he chooses, most notably in his Golden Globe-winning portrayal of President Jed Bartlet on the hit series The West Wing. Martin's 4 children, Charlie, Emilio, Ramon, and Renee, all work in the entertainment industry. Born Ramon Estevez to Spanish and Irish immigrants, Martin and his wife of 50 years, Janet, live in Malibu, California.
Hola, Emilio.
Just a stone's throw from son Emilio Estevez,
¿Qué tal? How you doing?
who is carrying on the family tradition of winemaking.
What do you got today?
Well, nothing you can have.
Nothing I can have, but I can look. This is the
label.
new brew.
New label.
Yeah.
In Pop's Vineyard
Yes.
in Galicia.
This is the photograph we took in the vineyard
Yeah.
in 1969.
Right.
Amazing.
And if you see, you are credited with taking the photo. Ramon Gerard Antonio Estevez.
The photographer.
Yeah.
I'm going on this journey for myself, but the residual effect could very well be beneficial to my children and their children. That would be a wonderful gift for them, I think. I don't know very much about my father's ancestry in Spain. I have less information about my father's side than my mother's. My mother's name was Mary Ann Phelan, and she was born in Borrisokane, County Tipperary, in Ireland, of course. Unfortunately, she died very young. She was just 48 when she died in 1951, and I was almost 11. So a lot of her memory has faded over the years, but she had a brother named Michael Phelan, who I've always been fascinated with. He was an Irish volunteer with the Irish Republican Army in the War of Independence from Great Britain. But I don't know the extent of his activity in the Civil War in Ireland in the 1920s. So that intrigues me immensely, because I've spent a good number of years protesting for peace and social justice, and I've been tossed in jail more than a couple of times because of it. So I'm really curious to know where that committed spirit comes from. Did my Uncle Michael or anyone else in my family have similar convictions? I'm going to begin my search for Michael here on ancestry.com. And here we go. I see his death record here, which tells me he died in Tipperary, but not much else. It looks like I'm going to have to go to Ireland myself to find out more about Michael Phelan. I'm starting my search in Dublin. I think I should begin at the military archives to see if there's any record of my Uncle Michael Phelan's involvement in the Irish Civil War.
Now, Mr. Sheen, we've found Michael Phelan's application under the 1934 Act. So if you want to have a look, and if you wouldn't mind wearing these gloves, please.
I will.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. Okay. Oh my. Whoa. It's amazing. This is all in his hand. This is an actual document that he filled out in order to get his pension for service in the Army. All right, it's saying here, continuous active service period from 12 July 1921 to June 30th, 1922. So that would be the beginning of the Civil War.
The Irish Civil War began on June 28, 1922, amid controversy regarding Ireland's freedom from Great Britain. Just 6 months before, the Anglo-Irish Peace Treaty was signed, dividing the region into 2 territories, Northern Ireland and the newly created Irish Free State, which was deemed a self-governing dominion under the British Crown. For years before, the old IRA, under the leadership of Michael Collins, had been fighting for a truly free and entirely independent Ireland. And when the treaty was offered, Michael Collins felt it was a step toward their ultimate goal and accepted. But many of the staunch activists who fought alongside Collins for years felt betrayed and continued to push for an Irish republic, resulting in the all-out Irish Civil War.
All right, here looks like the letter, a statement in support of my application for pension after an armed attack on Free State troops with landmine laid on July 20th near Roscrea. I was captured with others and taken to Maryborough Prison and released there on December 23rd, 1922. Whilst in Maryborough, I assisted to burn the prison. Oh my God, he burned down the prison. I continued with a small company in my own area to be active, blocking roads, cutting telegraph poles, etc. I was arrested on March 10th by Free State troops and served in Burr, Athlone, and Kilmainham jail, released from latter in October 1923.
Wait, if he was captured by Free State troops, that means he was fighting against Michael Collins and the treaty.
It's interesting because I had thought he was on the other side during the Civil War, that he was supporting Mick Collins, but evidently he was on the other side supporting the Republic. I didn't know this. I'm inclined to become more and more interested in the mystery of Michael Phelan because, you know, he was a great mystery to all of us, particularly those in the States. We only heard rumors about his involvement with the Civil War, but until now, I didn't realize what side he was even on. Thought it was the other one. So this makes quite a big difference in understanding where he stood and what it cost him, because he was imprisoned on several different occasions. And it leads me to want to know more.
Martin Sheen is in Dublin, where he's just discovered that his uncle Michael Phelan was fighting against Michael Collins and the Anglo-Irish Treaty, which created an Irish Free State as a dominion under the British Empire. Martin is meeting with Dr. Edward Madigan to get a better understanding of his uncle's decision to continue the fight for an independent Ireland.
I was surprised to learn this morning that he opposed the Free Staters. And what really fascinated me was his imprisonment and the number of times.
What happens is that very staunchly anti-treaty IRA men and IRA officers, especially in the south, places like Tipperary and Cork, say, we will never accept this treaty. We've sworn to fight for Irish independence, and that's what we're going to continue to do. The people who are in favour of the treaty, they form the National Army, what Michael here refers to in his pension record as the Free State Army. And the Free State Army go to war against the anti-treaty IRA. So you can understand the motivations of a very idealistic young man like your uncle. This is something that he committed his life to, and now he's being told, well, it was all in vain. We haven't established a republic, or we haven't defended the republic that we'd sworn to die for. So he's a committed Republican. He's part of the movement. He's active in it. And the sort of activity we see him involved in the pension records, raiding barracks, getting imprisoned, arrested, this is very typical of IRA activity in the South.
So he's right in the middle of it.
He's at the epicenter of what's going on here. When he's in prison, it's not simply, okay, I'm in jail now and that's it. He continues to serve. This is active service as well. So he continues to resist the regime from inside the prison walls. He's still active. He sees himself as a prisoner of war, and it's his duty to keep annoying the establishment.
We heard he burned one down.
Yeah, I mean, he was active. There was organized disobedience and resistance of the prison regime and destruction of the whole prison. And so his activity during this period definitely suggests that he was a man of commitment, a man of conviction, and a brave man. In a very real way, Michael Phelan's story is the story of the Irish Revolution.
I have a very great appreciation and admiration for his idealism and his courage and his commitment to a cause that he believed in, a cause of freedom, and what he was willing to pay for that. And so I'm looking forward now to visiting one of the jails that my uncle Michael was confined to, and that would be Kilmainham jail here in Dublin. Hello.
Hello there.
You're Will.
I am. Welcome.
Good to meet you. Thank you so much. So, this is it.
This is Kilmainham.
Wow. Oh my God. Draconian, to say the least.
Yeah, this is probably the most iconic prison of the revolutionary period.
So was my uncle held in this
This very
So as far as we know,
compound?
as far as we know, your uncle was held in this wing. Our best guess is that he's held up on this floor here.
The
and
second
in that
floor?
cell, yeah, in that cell. Would you like to go up and have a look at that
Yes,
cell?
I would. Yes,
Okay.
thanks so much. Yeah. Here we go. Wow.
This is the cell where we think perhaps your uncle was held.
Wow.
So you can see the conditions here. They're not very pleasant, very small cells. You've got very poor sanitation here. It's quite overcrowded during the Civil War period. You've got very basic bedding.
And there'd be one person in here? He would have been alone in here?
It varied. So the ideal was that there would be one person here,
Yeah.
but the Civil War is a period when you have lots of people in prison. Come the end of the Civil War, we're not exactly sure, but we think there are about 12,000 people in various prisons and camps around Ireland.
I'm enormously proud of him. I would like to hope that if I had been here in Ireland at the time, I would have followed him, you know, and I'd have been as committed as he was. I've been involved in a lot of campaigns for peace and social justice, and I had the same kind of commitment in those areas that he had here. And that is that you really do it for yourself. You don't expect to change the world. You don't expect to even influence your family or your friends. You do it because you cannot not do it and be who you are or who you're meant to be. This part of the journey is over, and now we're headed to my father's side in Spain, and I'm enormously curious about what awaits me there.
So the first stop on my journey into the Estevez side will be the Spanish capital of Madrid.
And we'll be visiting one of my favorite people in all the world, my sister Carmen. She has a lot of information because she's lived here for so long and worked here, and so she has a lot more knowledge and a better understanding of our father's Spanish heritage than I could ever have. Don't you,
You are going to do this without me. Before we talk about Pop, I just thought it might be nice to look at us. Sons and daughter of immigrants. See, at a very early age, you obviously didn't want much to do with the rest of us. You see hiding over here trying to
Remove
pretend.
myself
You've already
from
got that James Dean pose.
Before he had it.
Before he had it.
Right.
Yes, I think that we
Oh,
should
God.
make
Don't
a
look
note
at
of
me. Don't
that.
look at me.
Very
I think I had a
wounded,
big
tortured.
safety pin holding up my overalls.
This is our grandmother.
Oh, my God.
In
That's herself.
Cardarubius, yes.
That's the old homestead.
Yes, yes, yes. We think we were poor, but they were really poor. I mean, really poor.
I know our grandparents Manuel and Dolores had 7 children, but Carmen has a fascinating piece of information about our dad's youngest brother, our uncle, Matías.
You remember the Spanish Civil War?
Sure.
Yeah, well, Matías was arrested as a communist, and he was in jail in Tui. Every time he would go by that, what is now a cultural center, he would say, "Oh, they had me in there, and they were going to kill me, and now they're all dead, and I'm still alive."
This is news to me because I'd only heard kind of rumors and stories. I didn't know about Matías' background. I knew that he was forbidden to travel.
Yeah, that's when he was marked as a communist.
Yeah.
Matías's home in Galicia was precisely where the Spanish Civil War began. In 1936, General Francisco Franco and his rebel forces launched a violent coup d'etat against the democratically elected Spanish Republic. Anyone who opposed Franco's regime and fought to restore the elected government, like Matías Estes, was thrown in jail. The resulting civil war raged for 3 years until Franco emerged victorious. Franco's brutal fascist dictatorship remained in power for nearly 40 years until his death in 1975.
And this is Matías.
Oh, my God.
This is Matías with Joaquina and his daughters, Angelita and Lola.
It's so interesting because there were civil wars in both of our parents' countries.
Yeah, and we had no idea what was,
And the suffering that they endured. I'm particularly interested in Matías and his background. He went through the Civil War, and I'm interested in finding out specifically what happened to him and why.
Political activism runs deep on both sides of Martin Sheen's family. In Ireland, Martin discovered that his uncle Michael, a member of the IRA, landed in jail for his beliefs, just like Martin himself. Now in Spain, Martin has found another uncle who fought for freedom, this time in the Spanish Civil War, against Franco's fascist rebel forces.
I'm particularly interested in the story of my uncle Matías's involvement in the Civil War, so I'm meeting with historian Alejandro Quiroga.
I'm hoping, Alex, that you can enlighten me with some truth about Matías.
Yeah, he had a very interesting life and a very difficult life. The first reference of your uncle Matías is a reference in this book that was written by a pro-Franco priest. So this is a propaganda book. So this is the actual translation.
By mid-July 1936, armed groups committed all kinds of abuses. One of those groups was led by Matías Estes Martinez, also known as El Rato, the mouse. His gang went on a van to the house of the mayor of the village, Mr. Jose Gonzalez. The group required the mayor to join them in an attack on a local military police barracks and threatened to kill him if he was not to obey. So basically he was fighting against the rebels.
Yeah. I think it's quite important the dates, because dates are the 20th and the 21st of July 1936.
That's very near the start of the Civil War.
That's the very beginning, exactly. So he is actually attempting to stop the coup d'etat. And what we know is that he was arrested after that. I was put in front of a military tribunal. And they charged him with military rebellion.
They weren't even a legitimate government.
No.
They were a military coup, and they were already holding tribunals. So these fascists were forcing their form of law on people who were law-abiding. That's the bottom line, isn't it?
That is the bottom line.
Yeah.
And you can read the sentence.
We do declare that Matías Estes Martinez must be condemned to life imprisonment. So, my God, life imprisonment. Do you know where he was in prison?
We know that because this book is episodes of terror during the Civil War in the island of San Simón. And this is the list of prisoners.
Wow, there were a lot of Esteveses. I probably had a whole bunch of relatives there with him. My God. So here he is. Would he be 6'11"? Is that his prison number?
That's the prison number, yeah. This is a place of extermination, a place of terror, a place created with the idea of, in a very fascist manner, of purifying the nation. The idea is to put as many people as possible there. If they die out of starvation or lack of sanitary conditions, it doesn't matter.
Prior to the Civil War, Spanish jails held some 12,000 convicts. But after the war's end, the number of detainees swelled to more than 1 million. Nearly 100,000 of them died behind bars. Matías Estes served a year of his life sentence in San Simón before he was transferred in 1937 to Franco's largest and most notorious prison, San Cristóbal, near Pamplona.
We have found the actual register of San Cristóbal. This is the sort of clase de pena, the sort of sentence, life imprisonment. He is actually sentenced on 24th of September, 1936.
But I know he didn't serve a life sentence.
Does it say anything about when he is to be released, or?
He is due to released here.
Oh my God, 1966?
Did he serve that whole time?
He didn't. He was released in 1940.
Thank God.
Yeah.
And what does this say?
Prisión atenuada. which means that he was released but still under surveillance.
He was like under house arrest, and it says here until 1966. It's astonishing. So he spent a total of 4 years in prison, 1 year on San Simon Island, and 3 years in San Cristóbal in Pamplona. And they kept records of all these people that far after the war. That's like 30 years. I had no idea that he suffered this gravely. What a brave guy. He survived 4 years in 2 different concentration camps, and they were instituted to break people's will and to create fear in the populace, and that's what they did. So I'm just anxious to get to Pamplona and discover his circumstances in San Cristobal.
Alejandro suggested I meet with Spanish Civil War historian Julius Ruiz.
Matías would have arrived by bus and or by van. He would have been driven through those gates, and then it would have been driven through this tunnel.
Oh my God, it's cavern. It's like an old cathedral.
It's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Absolutely extraordinary.
Yeah. How many were confined here?
When it was used before the Civil War to hold the prisoners of the Revolution, maybe 600-700 prisoners were here. But by the time your uncle arrived, prisoners were arriving en masse from all over Spain. And so in 1938, there were 2,500.
Wow.
If we walk here, what we're going to see is something that's Dante-esque. We're now entering the worst of the very worst.
Wow. This is kind of what it would have been like at night down here.
Well,
or even in high noon, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, my.
So here we are. This is just one of the cells in which 25 to 50 prisoners would have been held.
This is the only source of light?
This is the only source of light that they had. You see, there's no glass.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was open to the elements. We're very close to the Pyrenees, so in winter, we're talking sub-zero temperatures, biting winds. This is a reasonably warm, sunny day, so you can just imagine this was where, you know, he was expected to serve his 30 years sentence.
Wow. Boy, oh boy. There's a great similarity here on this journey to San Cristóbal from Kilmainham. The idealism of both of these young men, both uncles, the same age, years difference maybe, idealistic, tough, deeply human, and they suffered greatly for it. This place is, I've never seen anything like this. I can only imagine what being confined here at that time and never knowing how it was going to end and how he must have felt when he was released, because he really wasn't released. He was on a tether. He was out from behind these walls, but he was confined to the walls of his own village. And you know, these scoundrels denigrated him by calling him El Rato, which means the mouse. He outlived all of these fascists. So in the end, he was the mouse that roared. And I say, God bless him.
Martin Sheen is in Spain, where he's discovered that his uncle Matías Estes was a political activist sentenced to life in prison for his beliefs. Martin is now trying to dig further back into his Spanish ancestry. His sister Carmen sent him their father Francisco's birth certificate. Martin is in Tui, meeting with genealogist Matthew Hovius to see what secrets it may contain.
So, Matthew, this is my father's birth certificate. The problem is it's in Gallego. And not only do I not speak Spanish, I don't speak Gallego either. So if you could help me,
sure, if you'd like, let's go
grateful.
through the text here. Now let's see, we've got your father Francisco. So it says, he is the legitimate son of Manuel Estevez Fernández, that would be your grandfather, and of Dolores Martínez, that would be your grandmother, and The maternal grandparents of the child are Carmen Martinez and grandfather unknown.
It's amazing to learn that my great-grandmother was named Carmen Martinez, and Matthew was able to take me back 3 more generations to the 1700s and to my 4th great-grandparents, Don Diego Francisco Suarez and Maria Gonzalez. But it sounds like Matthew has found something intriguing about Don Diego and Maria Gonzalez in the marriage record of their daughter, Paula.
This gives us a lot of interesting information, but there's one particularly important aspect of the record. If you notice here where it describes Paula, it says, hija natural de Don Diego Suarez y de María Antonia González. And what that means is that Paula
She's the natural daughter.
Is the natural daughter
of Don
Diego
Diego
Suarez.
And Maria Gonzalez.
That's right.
Why is it important to say that?
Well, because what that means is if she's the natural daughter, you notice that Pelayo, her husband, is described as the legitimate son of his parents. If Paula is described as the natural daughter of Don Diego, that means that her father wasn't married to her mother.
Her father, Don Diego,
was not married to Maria Gonzalez. Now let's take a look at Diego's own marriage record. Now everything we've seen so far have been books from Parderrubias. This register is actually from Cathedral in Tui. Now this is in 1740s, and what the priest is telling us is, I celebrated the marriage contracted by Don Diego Suarez de Lago, who married Manuela de Alfaya. We have Paula Suarez's mother as Maria Gonzalez.
Yes.
And here we see Don Diego marrying Manuela de Alfaya.
Whoops.
So, not only was Don Diego not married to Maria Gonzalez, he was actually married to a woman named Manuela del Faya. And then I learned that Don Diego didn't stop there. In addition to my 3rd great-grandmother Paula, he and his mistress Maria went on to have 5 more illegitimate children together.
And this is the baptism book covering
1739 to 1780.
But they also used the baptism register for some other sacraments, such as confirmation.
I see.
And the way confirmation was done at the time was usually not every year, but every few years, if some particularly prominent local churchman happened to come through, like the Bishop of Tui or someone like that, all the children who hadn't been confirmed since the last visit would be brought out for confirmation. Now, if you notice, this was in September 1777, and I can tell you that your great-great-great-great-grandfather, Don Diego, died just 3 years before this. So this would have been the first confirmation ceremony in Parderrubias since Diego had passed away. And
so she came out of the closet with this brood of children.
Exactly.
After they put him in the ground.
And I think what this says about her was that she must have been a very loyal person, because she seems to have kept all these children out of sight for as long as she could.
This is an extraordinary woman, Maria Gonzalez. Wow. How did Don Diego come to his status as a Don?
For Galicia, the first place I would look would be the regional archive known as the Archivo del Reino de Galicia in La Coruña.
This investigation is getting curiouser and curiouser. And we have landed on a very interesting couple, namely I want to say Don Juan. He appears he was a bit of a Don Juan. He's Don Diego Suarez. And I have to go to La Coruña to find out more about Don Diego and see just what his life was all about and how many relatives he left on my tree.
Martin Sheen is in northern Spain exploring his father's family history. He's just learned that his 4th great-grandfather, Diego Suarez, had 6 illegitimate children, but was also referred to in the records as a Don. So Martin is enlisting historian Edward Berend Martinez to find out who this prominent man really was.
I have here the only document that we have relating to Don Diego Francisco Suarez, your great-great-great-great-grandfather. So I'll let you take a look at that.
Oh, my.
And it says, translated here for you.
Oh, wow. In the said town and jurisdiction on 24 June of the said year, His Honor, Don Diego Francisco Suarez, the said ordinary judge. What is this all about? Is Don Diego Francisco Juarez a judge?
Yeah, absolutely.
He is the highest authority, legal authority in the community?
Yeah, absolutely.
Unbelievable. So the judge stated that based on the contents of the said proceedings regarding the absence of Antonio Pereira, single woman, he would and did order that the following edict be made public as specified in the law. So please tell me, Ed, this this judge, Don Diego Francisco Suarez, has decreed someone is a criminal.
Yes. He's going after a young woman, Antonia Pereira, who had had an affair with a very privileged man in the community. When they say privileged, meaning he's untouchable, they mean very likely a cleric or a priest.
Oh.
And then it turned out in the spring of 1748, she gets pregnant. And then Antonia goes off to a midwife to seek remedies for the pregnancy.
An abortion?
Yeah.
Wow. So the basic crime here, if you will, is not the affair or the impending birth, but the abortion.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Don Diego Francisco Suarez was pursuing Antonia with as much power and vigor as he could.
Okay.
In fact, he sends out an order to have wanted posters put up all over the area.
But his motivation really strikes me as double standard, obviously, because he was engaged while he was married in an illicit affair with Senora Gonzalez, and he had 6 children.
Right, but I don't think it ever occurred. I
So
mean,
in essence, he was quite above the law, we would say.
Yeah, he is the law.
He is the law.
Right.
Okay, wow. Don Diego, you son of a gun.
I've done a bit more research. We have his family tree.
Wow. That's taking us on my grandmother's side to Don Diego. And he is buried 6 December 1773 in the Tuy Cathedral in Tuy, Galicia. He's buried in the cathedral.
Yeah.
Wow. He really was a big shot.
Yeah, he was.
Now we're going to look at my grandfather's side. His father was Agustin Esteves Martinez, and Agustin's father was Jose Esteves, and he was married to Maria Rosa Martinez, and her mother and father are Juan Martinez and his wife Liberate. And her father is Ramon Martinez, and his wife is Antonio Pereira.
The young girl.
Oh my God.
Isn't that amazing?
Nearly 150 years after Don Diego Suarez's attempted prosecution of the young Antonia Pereira, an extraordinary thing happened. 2 lines on my family tree converged when my grandfather, Manuel Esteves Fernandez, married my grandmother, Dolores Martinez, which means, incredibly, that it was my 4th great-grandmother who was being relentlessly pursued by my 4th great-grandfather.
Unbelievable.
It's amazing that we have one document that leads to this result.
It's just astonishing that the connection is so far back and so intimate and yet so spread apart over 2 centuries. This is the Antonia that was so scandalized and brutalized and pursued.
But apparently she was able to come back to Parderubias and make a life for herself and get married.
Astonishing. This extraordinary young woman pursued by this unbelievable figure, Don Diego Francisco Suarez. Wait till Carmen gets a load of this. It makes me feel a bit more human to have uncovered what this dear woman, particularly Antonio, did as a young single girl, what she endured, and how she kept her life together and stayed in that community with all of this exposure falling on her. This disgrace makes me extremely proud to have been grown on the same tree as my great-great-great-great-grandmother, Antonia.
Martin Sheen has experienced one revelation after another in both his Irish and his Spanish ancestry.
I'm heading to the village of Pararrubias to meet my sister Carmen at the site where our father was born and raised. I can't wait to share what I've learned with her and my son, Ramon.
I've been on quite a journey these last few weeks, and I have a lot of information I need to share with you. To have uncovered information on two uncles, both of whom suffer imprisonment and ostracization by the community. I didn't have a clue. It encourages me to continue my work in peace and justice. And now I have a sense of where that gene comes from. And then to have had this whole other section of the tree suddenly blossom before my eyes, where we go to Maria Gonzalez, who has this association with the Don. If you had told me at the beginning of this journey where I was going, I wouldn't have imagined such a place. Tell me the name of the girl again.
Antonia Pereira.
And who prosecuted her?
Don Diego Francisco Suarez.
Your great-great-great-great-grandfather. Are you ready to meet your great-great-great-great-grandmother? Tell me the name.
Oh my God.
Aquí. Say her name.
Antonia Pereira.
And he is our great-great-great-great-grandfather who prosecuted her.
Prosecuted her.
This is the Spain where these people live.
Oh my.
It's unbelievable. I mean, you couldn't come up with this if you tried.
You could.
This is unbelievable.
It's astonishing that the tree has revealed what you couldn't have imagined. And if you'd written a novel with all these truths in it, they'd said, it's a bit over the top. It actually happened.
With an illustrious career in film, television, and theater, actress Marisa Tomei first shot to fame in the movie My Cousin Vinny, a performance for which she was awarded an Oscar. It would be the first of many award nominations to come, including 2 more Oscar nominations for In the Bedroom and The Wrestler. Marisa grew up in Brooklyn, but now lives in Los Angeles. Her strong family ties often bring her back to New York, where her parents still live.
Being from Brooklyn is part of my identity, and so is being Italian. The traditions and how we mark the holidays or the seasons or family occasions, that's a really big part of my family life. I love hearing family stories. I love poring over old photos. And over the years, my dad has done a lot of research and built a very big family tree for the Tomei side, but we know far less about my mom's side. One of the only things I do know about my mom's family is a legend I heard growing up. My mom's grandfather, Leopoldo Bianchi, was murdered. The story is that he was shot in a bar because he was either having an affair with someone and the husband had a pistol, or he owed him money, or both. There's something that's been a little bit shrouded there. I'm curious about the story of my great-grandfather's murder, and I'd like to know anything that has to do with my mom's side, because that's my heart of hearts, coming from my mom. So I'm on the way to my parents' house to talk to my mom and my dad and my brother before I begin the search into my mom's family.
Hi, Ronnie. How are you? How you doing?
Hi, good.
Look who's here. Hi. Hi. Good to see you. So, you gonna help me with my journey?
I hope so.
Our journey.
I'll tell you whatever I know.
Don't hold back.
No, not holding back. This is the Bianchi family. So Tito, Guido, Antonino, Bruno, Leopoldo.
This is your father's brothers.
Correct.
And the two
Bianchis
sisters.
And the two sisters.
And who was it? Do you know their father?
That was Dionisio, I believe. Dionisio, isn't that right?
Dionysius. Good name. I like that name.
Dionisio.
Yes.
We were going to name you Dionysius.
I would have taken it. It would have led to great things.
Well, you know, I'm curious about this grandfather of mine, Leopoldo, otherwise known as Francesco Bianchi, who was murdered in 1910. And that really has become the mystery to me.
The family lore doesn't really put a good light on him. It sounds like he was either cheating or something.
That's exactly
up
the
to
story.
something.
What was the reason? Was it because of his philandering? I'm wondering, besides my grandmother, of course, having it so difficult, but how was it for my father?
Your dad.
My father was only 2 years old when that happened, and his brother was 1 year old, so my grandmother was left with two babies at that time, and it must have been just so awful, so awful. I put together my family tree from ancestry.com, and this is the Bianchi side. And there is Francesco, L for Leopoldo Bianchi, and his wife, Adelaide Cannavaro.
When did the Bianchis go to Elba?
When did the
Bianchis
go?
didn't go to Elba. It was my grandmother, Adelaide, who I'm named for. She was from there, to Cannavaro.
Oh.
And then I guess when she married Leopoldo, he lived
He went there.
He went there.
That seems
but
unusual.
it's very close, you know, to it's part of Tuscany. So, but the rest of the Bianchis were still in Cesena.
Oh, right.
So my great-grandmother is Adelaide Cannavaro, whom my mother was named after, and Adelaide Cannavaro comes from Elba. Her husband, Leopoldo Bianchi, was from Cesena. And I want to know more about my great-grandfather Leopoldo's mysterious murder, and I'm also really interested in exploring my great-grandmother's family, the Cannavaros. Okay, Mom.
So, got your work cut out for
I'll
you.
try to find this out for you.
Thank you.
I'm surprised that my mom is so curious about this murder because she never really talked about it that much. I wonder what it really does mean to her. I really can't wait to talk to my brother about it. So that was pretty interesting hearing Mom talk about her father's family that way.
Yeah.
Mom doesn't even know really where this killing took place.
Yeah.
It really happened. It really
yeah.
happened to a real person, and
Yeah.
we don't know why. And we don't know really how that affected Grandpa Armando, and we don't know how that really then went on to shape him, that went on to shape her. And that's why I'm mostly curious about and excited to bring it home for Mom.
Yeah.
I mean, it could maybe not be about love.
I suspect that you're going to find out that there is something else.
I'll be back to tell the tales.
Well, yeah, good luck. Mwah. Love you. I'm so curious to hear how it's going to go.
I'm off to Italy to investigate my great-grandfather Leopoldo Bianchi's mysterious murder in 1910. My first stop is in Cesena in Tuscany, where Leopoldo lived. While I'm here in Italy, I'm also going to search for information about Leopoldo's wife, my great-grandmother, Adelaide Cannavaro. I'm meeting with an Italian guide, Fabio Di Segni, and we're starting my search in the archives at the Cesena Cemetery.
Marisa.
Ciao.
Fabio.
Fabio,
Nice to meet
Marisa.
you.
Yes.
Nice to meet you. How can
Hi.
I help you, Marisa?
You can help me This is a photograph of my great-grandfather,
Yes.
my bisnonno.
Bisnonno, yes.
Bisnonno.
Very good.
His name is Francesco Leopoldo Bianchi.
Francesco Leopoldo Bianchi, yes.
Yeah.
He was from Cesena.
From Cesena.
Yes, okay.
Yeah.
We are here at the cemetery in Cesena, and we can have a look at the archive
Yeah.
to find more information about your bisnonno.
Thank you, thank you.
Okay, please come in.
Okay. What do you think? Any resemblance? Or
Yes, I can see a resemblance.
Buongiorno.
Buongiorno. Marisa.
Piacere, Loris.
Piacere.
Fabio. Loris, piacere.
So thank you for helping me. This is a photo of my great-grandfather, Francesco Leopoldo Bianchi.
Sì.
And I'm wondering if you have any documents about when he died.
Do you know exactly the year?
1910.
1910.
Sì.
Cerco in archivio quel documento degli anni 1910.
1910.
Yes. Nel 1910 non c'è questo documento.
Non c'è?
Proviamo nell'anno 1911.
Oh, okay. 1911?
Yes, he's going to look for 1911.
Allora, eccolo qua.
See? So what is all this?
Okay. The document says that your great-grandfather was his body was transported to Cesena.
Transported to Chechnya.
Transported to Chechnya.
So he didn't die here, he died
No,
somewhere else.
He died somewhere else. I translate this document in English for you.
March 10th, 1911, transport of body. Considering the request of Mr. Dionisio Bianchi to be authorized to transport to Cesena the remains of Francesco Leopoldo Bianchi, who died for reasons because of illness. It's certainly different than what I'd been told.
Marisa Tomei is in Cesena, Italy, searching for the truth behind her great-grandfather, Leopoldo Bianchi's death. She's just discovered that, contrary to the family story he was murdered over an affair, Leopoldo seems to have died of a mysterious illness.
Dying for an illness. Anything else in this? Like, what date did he die?
He died the 7th of March, 1911.
Grazie.
Prego.
So è possibile to see la tomba?
Sì.
Right now, it's like a treasure hunt. I think there's a lot more to his death. What kind of illness could it have been? Was it an illness? Maybe not. The family lore is that he was murdered for womanizing. I think there are many more details to be had about Leopoldo's death. And I'm still not even sure where he died or how the story of his death seems to be lost in translation. I see his wife, my great-grandmother, Adelaide Cannavaro, is buried with him. Now, I know she was from Elba, and according to my mom, both Adelaide and Leopoldo lived there at some point. I guess it's possible that Leopoldo died on Elba, and since I'm also hoping to find some records on Adelaide's family, I'm heading to Elba next.
Elba is a small island with a big history. Just 12 miles off the coast of Tuscany, Elba is most famously known as French Emperor Napoleon's place of exile after European allies halted his continental conquest and forced him to abdicate in 1814. Napoleon was allowed to rule the island, and during his year-long banishment, he introduced economic and social reforms that greatly benefited the 12,000 citizens of Elba.
Since Fabio said the Catholic Church was such a big part of people's lives at the turn of the century, we're going to head to the local parish, where I'm hoping the priest will find some records on the Cannavaro family. How far back do you think this church goes?
I think the first stone is 1,200.
Oh my gosh.
Really old.
Oh,
padre, grazie. Questi sono tutti i registri che sono riuscito a trovare sulla famiglia Cannavaro.
These are all the Cannavaro family,
Yes,
all of them?
all of them. This is a baptistry registry,
Yeah.
so you can
So it
find.
goes back through
Yeah,
all
it goes
these.
back to
Oh, this is the
1860.
1800s we're
yes.
starting with. Do you see the name Cannavaro? Am I missing Cannavaro?
Let's see.
Here's the word name Cannavaro. Adelaide. Does it say the daughter Phelan?
Yes, Phelan.
Daughter of Arturo?
Arturo. I think the birth date is this one here. 1st of May, 1887.
Okay, we're in 1855 now. So
Grandfather.
Arturo, my great-great-grandfather.
Grandfather.
You bees.
Bees.
You say
no,
bees? Like we do great-great bees?
Yes.
Giuseppe Luigi Cannavaro.
Yeah.
The collection of records is amazing. They follow the Cannavaro line all the way back and prove my great-grandmother Adelaide Cannavaro's family goes back in this town 10 generations, back to Alessandro Cannavaro, who was born here in 1641. 8 times great-grandfather, so
great-grandfather.
about
Yes.
10 generations.
And this is the last book
Cannavaro.
that we can find of Cannavaro.
Knowing that the Cannavaros go back to my 8 times great-grandfather, it's interesting. But where did my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother meet? Were they here? Or did she somehow break that whole lineage, those 8 times back lineage, and was she the one to leave this island to go on to the mainland? And did she meet him there? Or did he whisk her away? Or who knows? I know that Leopoldo's body was transported from somewhere, but I don't know where that somewhere is. So I'm hoping to find that out here. And the mystery still remains between the story of this murder and then this supposed illness. That still all seems suspect. So I'm just looking for any other kind of records that could connect those dots. Fabio suggests we check the municipal records at the historical archives. So we're meeting with historian Dr. Gloria Peria. I'm here because my family's from Elba, the Cannavaro family. I know a lot about them. I was at the church, but I don't know anything about the Bianchi family.
Sì, ho trovato qualche documento che le può interessare e glielo faccio vedere.
She found some documents that maybe can be interesting.
Yeah. Okay. So this is the marriage certificate of Leopoldo Bianchi and Maria Cannavaro, Adelaide. The 25th of June, 1904. Okay, we're getting somewhere.
C'è anche questo documento.
This was so beautiful.
This is like a family certificate.
What does this mean, condition?
It's profession. Commerciante
Like a
means
commercial
like a
merchant?
merchant.
Like a merchant of what?
E ho saputo che la famiglia Bianchi era una famiglia benestante che si occupava di commercio della calce anche e ha conosciuto probabilmente.
Gloria said that the Cannavaro family owns a kiln business here in the island, and I think the Bianchi came over the island, and there was a link between the business and the love. Maybe they met through this
Through the heart
business. He moved from Elba the 3rd of August, 1910.
6 years later, after they got married,
6 years later, he moved.
to Cesena.
He moved to Cesena, yes.
So he maybe meets her father, whoever that is, and there's a family business. They meet, they fall in love, and 6 years later, they go back. And then 7 months after they move to the mainland, Leopoldo dies.
E infine le faccio vedere questo.
Elba was the local newspaper in 1911.
Oh, there's the front page. So, Leo, I see his name. Oh my God, I'm scared to read it. What did he do, that rascal?
Marisa Tomei is in Elba investigating the circumstances surrounding her great-grandfather Leopoldo Bianchi's death. She's just received a newspaper with his name in the headline.
Leopoldo Bianchi killed in Castiglioncello. From the mainland newspapers, we are informed that in Castiglioncello, a Terzilio, what a name,
Terzilio Lazzareschi,
for the sake of interest, treacherously shot Leopoldo Bianchi, killing him on the spot. Bianchi was very well known on the island of Elba. Lazzareschi was immediately arrested. Reading the article confirmed what we thought, that he had been murdered. I never really bought that there was an illness, even though we saw it documented. That just didn't add up. We know for sure that it was a treacherous murder, and it looks like we'll have to go to Castiglioncello where the murder took place. So Fabio is staying here in Elba to look for more information about Adelaide and the Cannavaro family, while I head to Castiglioncello where Leopoldo was murdered. I'm trying to understand the circumstances that caused Lazzareschi to shoot my great-grandpa, so Gloria suggested that I meet with Professor of History Stephen Hughes, who's asked me to join him at a local cafe. I need to know what happened here in Castiglioncello. I don't know why Leopoldo, my great-grandfather, was here at all, and I don't know. I know he was killed here, but I don't know where, I don't know why.
Okay, he was murdered here. And what we have is from Il Telegrafo. This is a newspaper from Livorno. And the murder's mentioned down here.
And homicide in Castiglioncello.
Right. And this is an actual translation.
Thank you. Yesterday at 6 p.m., this pleasant village was dismayed by an event that greatly saddened the inhabitants. Terzilio Lazzareschi recently settled in Castiglioncello. He's a well-off man who works as a kiln operator. That fits with what we've been finding out. For reasons that are still unknown, he met a Francesco Bianchi from Cecina, he himself a kiln operator, after a few words just outside the Pilar de Morelli's cafe.
Local tradition maintains that this was the Cafe Morelli. Yeah.
Right outside this. So this cafe has been here that long?
Yeah.
Terzilio, who the night before had been insulted and beaten, fired a shot, killing instantly Bianchi.
This is actually the indictment, which has all the details of the murder.
Oh, this comes from the court records.
This comes from the court records, and you have to understand, even though it says it's the Lucca Court of Appeals, this is the case created by the government before his trial, and then their suggestion that he be tried.
Terzilio Lazzareschi on March 7th, 1911 in Castiglioncello fired at Francesco Leopoldo Bianchi a gun from which the bullet struck the occipital region and exited the opposite side, and was the direct and only cause of his immediate death.
Yeah, so he was shot in the back of the head.
Yeah.
Good, okay.
The accused, Terzilio Lazzareschi, in January of this year acquired from Dionisio Bianchi, the father of the killed Francesco Leopoldo Bianchi, the business of a lime kiln in Castiglioncello, and he employed Francesco's brother Tito. Okay, right. So they were all, he said, let's all do this together and you can run it, and
right.
And you'll oversee it.
Right.
The good harmony between Lazzareschi and the Bianchi family quickly changed to mutual animosity when Lazzareschi fired Tito Bianchi from his job on March 5th over suspicion of disloyalty.
That's a critical piece of the whole puzzle. In a business kind of situation, it could mean a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. He was cooking the books, he was talking to competitors. On the other hand, it could just be a reason to get rid of him. Mm-hmm. What's important, though, to understand the motivation of why they beat him up and why they were so upset, is this disloyalty is an issue of honor to mm-hmm. Italian men at the time. Mm-hmm. So for them, for him to be dismissed for an issue of disloyalty was a major mark on their honor, on the family honor.
Well, also your whole business is at stake too.
Yeah, and in fact, if your honor was impugned, mm-hmm. people wouldn't do business with you. Yeah, exactly.
But we don't know if Terzilio's claims were true or not.
Exactly.
Is it established that there was disloyalty or there wasn't?
Marisa Tomei is at the site where her great-grandfather was murdered. she's just uncovered that Leopoldo Bianchi was shot in the back of the head by Terzilio Lazaretsky over a business deal gone wrong.
Tito was fired for disloyalty.
Right.
But he had Leopoldo broker the deal.
Exactly. Leopoldo set it up. He did
Yeah.
the mediation, he did the negotiations. And part of the negotiations were that Tito, his brother,
Would keep working
would
there.
keep working there. I assume in some kind of, managerial position. And so when Lazaretsky broke that deal, for whatever reason, and we don't know. I mean, this charge of disloyalty is all that's
what I'm
in
saying.
the.
We don't know what that is.
That's all we have. And their issues of business and honor were very important to them. And so they were very upset and they came after him.
On the 6th, Francesco Bianchi was moved to strike Lazaretsky's face with his fists, causing wounds that healed in 7 days.
Right. I don't know if you know this, but Italians are very concentrated on the face. Right? There are some very interesting laws about if you mark somebody permanently versus other damage to the body. And so any kind of blow to the face was an extremely serious offense.
On that evening, March 7th, Lazaretsky, seeing that Francesco Bianchi continued to maintain a threatening attitude towards him, armed himself with a revolver, and Leopoldo grabbed him, breaking 2 buttons off his waistcoat.
The indictment is taking that into consideration. You don't touch people in this society like that. I mean, that's an insult.
Having lost his self-control because of fear, and because he thought that Bianchi was armed with a revolver, anticipated by firing his own revolver at Bianchi, who fell dying. As Terzilio did this, Terzilio said, "E una," or, "and one."
He was going to go after Tito as the other brother because both brothers had threatened him and both brothers had insulted him.
There's Tito and there's Terzilio, and in the middle is Leopoldo, who's my great-grandpa. And he was defending his brother and his family and all the Bianchis, even his father, Dionisio Bianchi, who owned the whole business. It's interesting that this is 100 years later and this story has taken this long to kind of pull apart, because my brother had a dream when we were on a family vacation here in Castiglioncello. He woke up in the middle of the night and my little cousin, he talks in his sleep, my brother, and my little cousin reported back that he was saying, "Murder! Murder in the family!" And we never know why he had this dream. And it's so strange that there was a murder in the family right here. I'm heading to Lucca, about an hour north of Castiglioncello, where Lazaretsky was indicted. I want to find out the details of the trial. I want to know what really went on. So I'm meeting with an Italian legal expert and professor of history, Francesco Tamburini. I'm hoping that you can shed some light on anything having to do with Leopoldo Bianchi or Terzilio Lazaretsky or anything about that case.
In an article published in Pisa, we got here the article and the translation.
Lazaretsky Terzilio, 30 years of age, from Ponsacco, accused of voluntary homicide of Bianchi Francesco Leopoldo, was acquitted for legitimate defense. So they found that he was defending himself.
Yeah, because the jury established that there was no felony, but it was just self-defense.
Self-defense?
Yeah.
Coming from behind.
It's a strange and bizarre trial and judgment. But we have to take into account that Lazaretsky could afford the best man and the attorney at law at the moment. Gattai and Lamy were two of the most famous attorney in town.
In town.
It's like, in order to understand, O.J. Simpson and the Dream Team, So we found out that Terzilio Lazaretsky, as you can see from this original transcription of the judgment.
Oh my.
And this is the translation.
September 8th, 1912, so this is a year later.
Yeah.
Court of Appeals.
Terzi Lazaretsky was sentenced by the Court of Assises of the Circuit on April 4th, 1912, for carrying a prohibited weapon with a punishment of arrest for 38 days and a fine of 87 lira and a fifth of the court costs. So are they saying that he hardly did anything wrong? He just was carrying this gun that was
From
prohibited.
felony to misdemeanor. It's not the end of the story, because he dared to ask something to the jury.
Marisa Tomei is in Italy, trying to find out if justice was served in the murder of her great-grandfather, Leopoldo Bianchi. She's just learned the murderer, Terzilio Lazzareschi, was not a jealous husband, but a cold-blooded businessman who was acquitted for the crime.
He accepts that he went to a penal trial for voluntary homicide before the court in Pisa, and that he was acquitted following a favorable verdict, that when he was arrested, there were 500 lira found in his billfold. This is him speaking. Lazzareschi's saying.
He's asking to the court.
He's saying to the court, well, when I was arrested, there were 500 lira found in my billfold, and that sum was deposited with the postal administration of Pisa, and from that deposit, you withdrew 380 lira for the court costs, and there are still available 119 lira, and he wants his money back. 3 days before the final verdict, he said, and by the way, while we're discussing this,
I want them back.
I want that money back, yeah. How much is that money?
$2,500 today.
So he
It's a
wanted
lot of
about
money.
a third of that back. It's a terrible thing to kill somebody. I mean, what is it that drives people to that level of, to murder? You know, is it, I mean, the court is, what Terzilio is saying, it was the fear of his own life. But if he had that money in his pocket, why did he even have that money in his pocket that night? Maybe he was going to try to pay off Leopoldo Bianchi because Terzilio broke the contract. We just don't know.
At the time, there was a code of honor between real men. And kill a man with a gun at point-blank range in the back. It's such a terrible thing to do that you have to disappear from the area, and that's what he did. It disappeared from the records, from the historical records.
You're being accused of murder, and you're not concerned with your fate, defending your own honor, the remorse, whether you feel justified or not, in about killing someone. You're still making a point, hey, and I want that money. It's almost a sociopathic reaction. It's a very, very, very strange reaction. Really, a bad person came in and really did great harm to the family. When I was a little girl, I pictured the scene of the crime, and I pictured the bar, and it started to form some romantic notions in my mind. Now, I frame it in a really different way, and I feel that he needed someone to advocate for him, and he never got that. Before I head back to the States to share this story with my mom, I'm going to meet with Fabio, who says he has some fascinating news to share with me. Lazzareschi hires really super high-powered lawyers who he winds up being acquitted.
What?
Yeah, he winds up being acquitted and serving about 38 days.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
And funny enough, the name Lazzareschi could come from the word Lazzarone. The Lazzarone means a bad man.
Lazzarone.
Lazzarone.
You would say, un lazzarone.
Tu sei un Lazzarone.
Tu sei un lazzarone. Why didn't anyone tell me this from the beginning?
Really suit his name, I guess. Yes. On my research, I found an old relative of yours. Her name is Rosita Vannucci. She's 83 years old. She couldn't come today because she doesn't feel well. And I got a photo there, Rosetta.
Beautiful.
She was really sweet and lovely, and she wrote a letter for you. And
Really?
yes. Would you like to
Yeah.
read? Yes. Yeah.
So she's part of the Cannavaro connection?
She knew your great-grandmother Adelaide, and she told really, she remembered.
She remembers
yes,
Adelaide.
She
Oh my
wrote in
gosh.
Italian, yes. I wrote an English translation for you.
Thank you. I received word you are in Italy looking into your family history and wanted to get in touch to tell you what I know of your ancestors. I am Rosetta Vannucci, the daughter of Bruna Bianchi, who was your great-grandfather Leopoldo Bianchi's sister, making me your grandfather Armando Bianchi's cousin and your first cousin twice removed. I was very close to your great-grandmother Adelaide. She was a wonderful woman and was very sad when her husband died. After that man shot Leopoldo, Adelaide met a nice man in Genoa, who was a Marine and married him. He was a good man, she was happy, she loved to dance and laugh, and loved her boys very much. Your grandfather Armando worked on boats like his stepfather, so she asked Leopoldo's brother Guido in New York City to give Armando work and safe passage into the United States next time he docked there. When Armando arrived, Guido met him and covered him with a coat, sneaking him away. I had never heard that.
She gave me a photo of Adelaide.
She had this?
Yes.
You can see my mom a little bit. Thank you. This story really isn't a story of a broken family. She went on to marry a great guy, and my grandpa had a really great life. It's almost like the spirit of the characters was stronger than the actual events, because that's what still lives on. And there's a piece to that.
Marisa Tomei is back in New York City to share the surprising details of her great-grandfather's murder with her mother for the first time.
I'll be happy to tell my mother, Leopoldo really wasn't up to anything. He wasn't up to any trickery at all. He defended his brother, he defended the family honor. So that's a different spin on what's been told in the family. Terzilio Lazaretsky pulled out a gun. Yeah. And he shot him from behind, point blank.
Wow. Oh my God, horrendous.
I know.
Violent.
It's terrible.
Was there a trial?
He was a wealthy guy, and he hired like the dream team lawyers of the time, and they got him off.
Oh God, how infuriating.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
They got him off. It's upsetting, isn't it?
Oh,
I see,
God.
yeah.
Oh, my poor grandmother.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
What I know now is, regardless of what happened, he certainly didn't bring it upon himself. My mother was carrying an idea that he had put his family at risk and caused his family so much pain.
I had this impression that he was just a philanderer, you know. I guess too, possibly, I was thinking that it was his own fault that he had gotten into this mess and then left my poor father.
Oh,
you know,
yeah.
that he shouldn't have taken the risks that he did and left his wife widowed and his children orphaned because of his own nature and character. And so maybe that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
And that's
big.
nicer to hear.
the relief just wash over her. I wasn't expecting that. I don't think she was expecting that. It's the things we carry with us from our family's legacy, our family's history, even the secrets that we don't know that we're carrying.
I didn't expect that I would be feeling, I don't know, the sense of relief.
Wow.
It's like a resolution, yeah. It might take a little while. I think all of this absorbs into us and influences our behavior in some mystical way.
Yeah.
Some spiritual way affects the generations even to come.
Yeah. So we know now a lot more about Leopoldo's character, and now I have much more of a connection to him. I can feel his presence. He's much more, he's alive in my heart and in my mind's eye and in my family again.
Things certainly would have been different, if he hadn't been killed, because my father would never have come here.
Mm-hmm.
And then we wouldn't exist. This is a real gift.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love you.
Early, year of birth, 1822, and can read. Yes, he can read. Yes, he could write.
Take notice of where this particular census enumeration was listing these people.
Wait a minute. Central State Hospital. How do we have a Central State in Petersburg? Isn't that a mental hospital?
It is.
It is a mental hospital.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. He was a patient at the hospital.
He was.
In the mental hospital, in the
Correct.
mental ward. Wow.
Golden Globe-nominated actor, director, and producer Blair Underwood first became a household name for his portrayal of charismatic attorney Jonathan Rollins on the celebrated NBC drama L.A. Law. Throughout his 25-year career, Blair has highlighted important African-American issues through his work with charitable organizations and by the roles he chooses. He is a 5-time winner of the coveted NAACP Image Award. Blair lives in Los Angeles with his wife, Desiree DaCosta, and their 3 children, Paris, Brielle, and Blake.
Family to me means everything. I think the only way I've been able to navigate through Hollywood is because there were roots placed and there was a foundation laid from the very beginning of my life. I attribute that to my parents. My father's a retired Army colonel, 27 years in the United States military. He was an Army officer in the 1960s, which was a rarity at that time. So he was a leader, he was a trailblazer, but that came from my grandfather, Ernest Underwood Sr., who was the second African-American police officer in Steubenville, Ohio. I would, in the broad strokes and generalized sense, would love to take my father back to Africa. In a more specific sense, I'd love to find out exactly where the Underwood lineage came from. But there's much more information I have about that side of the family that I just don't have on my mother's side. I'd love to learn more about my mother's mother, my maternal grandmother, Bessie Royal. I don't know much about her, and I adored her. She passed away when I was 16, and so I'd love to know more about that line. It's invaluable to have that information and to be able to pass that along. So I'm starting this journey at my parents' house in Petersburg, Virginia. My brother Frank Jr. has been working on the Underwood family tree for years. But before we dig into that side of the family, I'm hoping my mother can give me more details about my grandmother Bessie, and maybe even Bessie's mother.
Mom, here's one thing I never knew much about. Your mother's mother, Ada White.
Well, she passed when your grandmother was 8 years old, and that's a picture.
That's why I love this picture. This is the only picture we have of Grandma, Bessie Royal, your mother, and her mother, Ada White. Who were her parents? Who's her family? And even her husband, Harry Royal.
I know he grew up in Lynchburg, Virginia.
What do you know about his parents?
I don't know very much about them, and that I'd like to know.
So Frank, I know you've been researching Dad's side, the Underwoods. What clues do you have for me?
Like every family runs into a brick wall somewhere along the line. It might be 300 years ago, it might be 500 years. But as African Americans, we run into a wall just about 150 years ago because we were slaves. So prior to the emancipation of slavery, there's very few records besides our own family records.
And that's where we hit the brick wall. But the great thing about science and technology today is that we can break through that brick wall DNA testing where they give you a swab and you swab the side of your mouth and you can, through your DNA, at least know where your people originated down the paternal line, the Underwood side. So to kind of shatter this brick wall, I will mail this out and see where it takes us.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's exciting.
While I'm waiting for the results of my DNA test for the Underwood side of the family, I'm going to see what I can find about my mother's grandparents, Harry Royal and Ada Bell White. I know the Royals lived in Lynchburg, and those records are kept in the state capitol in Richmond, 25 miles north of my parents' house. I'm starting my search at the Library of Virginia, where I'm meeting with Joseph Shumway, a genealogist who has already been digging through records looking for the Royals.
Hello, Blair.
Joseph.
Joseph.
How you doing?
Nice to meet you. Welcome to the Library of Virginia.
Thank you.
Follow me. So, we're going to start with this. This is the marriage record for Harry Royal and Ada White, taken from the City of Lynchburg marriage registers.
Oh, man. Let's see. Harry Royal.
Yeah.
Ada Bell White. Name of their parents, Ben and Fanny Royal. And the wife, Thomas and Mary White. Wow, never knew that, okay.
I actually have another document here. This is actually the marriage record for Harry's parents, Benjamin and Fanny.
So let's see, husband, Ben Royal, wife, Fanny Early.
So my great-grandmother, Ada Bell White's parents, are Thomas and Mary White. And my great-grandfather, Harry Royal's parents, are Benjamin Royal and Fanny Early. Then Joseph shows me Fanny's marriage record, which tells me her parents are Maria and Sonnie Early.
So with this information, I've done some looking around, found some interesting things on the Early family in particular that I want to have a look at with you. I've actually looked at Sonnie Early in a few of the United States federal census records. This is the census for 1900.
Let's see, Early. Oh, it's spelled differently. S-A-U-N-E-Y.
Yeah,
Sonnie Early. Looks like
right.
C. Okay, Sonnie Early. Year of birth, 1822. And can read. Yes, he can read. Yes, he could write.
Take notice of where this particular census enumeration was listing these people.
Wait a minute. Central State Hospital. I think we have a Central State in Petersburg. Isn't that a mental hospital?
It is.
It is a mental hospital.
Yeah.
That's what I thought. He was a patient at the hospital.
He was.
In the mental hospital, in the mental ward. Wow.
Blair Underwood is in Richmond, Virginia, on a journey into his mother's family history. He's just learned that his 3 times great-grandfather, Sonnie Early, was in a mental institution in 1900 at the age of 78.
The Central State Hospital was actually an all-black institution. It was the first one established just a few years after the Civil War.
Wow. Wow. Do we know why he was there? Or do we...
This census document doesn't give us any particular indication.
This is fascinating.
So he's in the mental hospital in 1900, but what about the census before that? That might give me an idea of when he was committed.
Now, the censuses were enumerated every 10 years. 1890, actually, the census was burned in a fire. So we have to jump to 1880 to get our next snapshot.
Sonnie Early, black, male, 56 years old, which coincides 20 years earlier. Laborer, farmer.
So he wasn't in the institution in 1880.
We're going to step back 10 more years now.
Oh, good.
To 1870.
Okay, so 10 years earlier, Sonnie Early. He's age 45, 43? 45. He was a blacksmith, so he was a blacksmith then.
Blacksmith at that time, it was a specialized trade. He's not just working as a farm laborer like we see him in 1880. The next logical step would be to search in the 1860 U.S. federal census for a person. However, the 1860 census, because it was enumerated during the time of slavery, only enumerated free blacks in the general population schedule.
Okay.
And I've actually already had a look at the 1860 census, have not been able to find Sonnie Early, which seems to suggest that he was a slave at that time.
Yeah, he wasn't free, yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Prior to emancipation, slaves were not listed by name in any census, only by number on a slave schedule as property of their owner. creating what is often referred to as the wall in the African American community, a historical void of information about their ancestors purely by omission. The only identifying characteristics in the slave schedule for someone like Sonnie Early would have been sex, age, color, mental capacity, and literacy.
So it seems Sonnie probably was a slave. And like many African American families, I've hit the wall.
You know, it's funny, of course, you embark upon a path like this and you know the history of slavery and ownership and chattel slavery and all of that, but it always just chafes me.
Well, it's clear that my 3 times great-grandfather, Sonnie, was in a significant decline over a 30-year period. In 1870, he was a highly valued blacksmith. But just 10 years later, in 1880, he was a farm worker. And then, by 1900, Sonnie was institutionalized. So what happened between 1880 and 1900 that landed him in a mental hospital? I'm on my way to visit historian Dan Fountain at the Jones Memorial Library in Lynchburg. He's been searching local records for me, looking for more information about Sonnie's life during the late 1800s.
There's a lot of things that we can find out about Sonnie that are here in newspapers, and it'll take a little bit of time, and we're to find some. We found a good bit about your great-great-great-grandfather.
Nice.
Let's take a little look at the reel here. Slide this on. All right, so we're looking for January 12th.
January 12th, what year are we talking about?
1876.
76. So it's 11 years after the Civil War. He's a free man.
He is a free man at this point. And
Sonnie Early.
Okay.
I see something here. Sonnie Early in limbo. It'll be remembered that this pestiferous darky.
they're not speaking kindly.
That's right.
At all.
All right. It will be remembered that this pestiferous darky, who claims to be the second Jesus, some time ago stole, skinned, and salted down a valuable cow belonging to Mr. R.M. Chambers. That gentleman, upon attempting to interview Sonnie in relation to the matter, found that the latter had declared war, unfurled his red banner, and loaded his blunderbuss.
It's a form of weapon.
For the protection of the beef, the cow. The interview culminated in Sonnie's attempting to shoot Mr. Chambers and in having a load of shot lodged in his own face. Wow, Sonnie! But to the disgust of the general public, he recovered and boldly proclaimed that he would in future steal as many cows as he chose, for experience had taught him that no man could kill him. He was committed to jail at liberty for safekeeping until the next term of the court, when he would be tried for stealing the cow and also for a murderous assault upon Mr. Chambers. Murderous assault.
Yes, but there are other instances we need to take a peek at.
Okay.
This is the Lynchburg Daily Virginian.
An eccentric character comes to grief, shot for cow stealing. On our streets is occasionally seen an eccentric character wearing badges and Kabbalistic signs on his hat and coat, and giving utterance to various incoherent prophecies and predictions. This is Sonnie Early, a Negro religious enthusiast or lunatic who professes to believe himself the second Jesus. Wow. So this is being 1875, right? So he was already self-professed Messiah, and then he gets shot in the jaw. Well, he was quite the character, wasn't he? Sonnie Early.
He certainly was noticed by this community. Here we have Sonnie's making bigger news.
He's making bigger news. You're making me nervous here, Dan.
Sorry.
Blair Underwood is in Lynchburg, Virginia at the Jones Memorial Library, trying to find out why his 3 times great-grandfather went from a highly skilled blacksmith to a mental institution 30 years later. Historian Dan Fountain has already shared the details of one incident between Sonnie and his neighbors, but there's more.
The New York Times, okay, this is Wednesday, January 23rd, 1884. Murders in the South of Lynchburg, Virginia. Charles Tardy, a farmer residing near here, yesterday shot and killed a Negro named Sonnie Early, an ex-convict. Early was cutting Tardy's timber, and when ordered to quit, attempted to brain Tardy with an axe, whereupon the latter, after due warning, drew a pistol and shot Early 3 times.
Okay.
They didn't kill him.
He's not dead. He's alive in 1900, so that's not accurate.
Right. Sonnie got shot in the face 10, 11 years prior to this. Now he's getting
Correct.
shot 3 times.
3 times.
we believe.
In this case, another squabble with someone local over, in this case, timber rather than a cow. From that same incident in 1884, we want to take a look at Campbell County shooting case.
Okay, Sonnie Early, shot by Charles Tardy on Monday in Campbell County, is still living, with prospects of recovery. Mr. Tardy was examined by a magistrate and discharged, it being a clear case of self-defense. The colored people, as it is said, are dissatisfied with his release and are making threats of violence.
Gives us a very clear indication that he's not isolated. He's not off on the beaten path by himself. And something that will help us put all of this in context is to look at the geography behind all of these events that will help tie them all together.
Oh, okay. We can do that?
We can do that.
This has been quite the revelation, just reading these news accounts, because he's a more complicated, complex individual than I initially thought.
I see an image of Sonnie emerging very much along the lines of a conjurer.
A what?
A conjurer. When you look at them, they are strikingly eclectic and eccentric in their appearance. Many conjurers wore things such as unusual clothing, fashioning crowns with shiny materials often on their heads.
So the article talked about the hat and the
Kabbalistic signs.
Right.
And so the imagery of Sonnie fits that perfectly.
Conjurers came from West African tradition and served a vital purpose in most slave communities. They negotiated the boundary between spirits and humans, offering their followers healing powers and protection from an overseer or slave master. Conjurers were seen as leaders in the African American community, and because of this power, the white population viewed conjurers as a threat.
Dan and I are visiting the site where Sonnie lived and where his conflicts with R.M. Chambers and Charles Tardy took place.
This would have been where Sonnie lived.
Really?
And if you'll take a look at this map, this is where their conflicts take place. You may notice and recognize the first name to the left, Chambers.
Yeah.
We know from the records that Chambers and Armistead are new arrivals to the area. They come in after the Civil War and have purchased this land and take up residence here. Mr. Armistead had asked Tardy to intervene and stop Sonnie from cutting the lumber.
Right.
These are newcomers.
Right.
Now, this is a copy of the Bedford County deposition that describes the cow incident with Chambers.
In the county of Bedford, S.A. Early did state to him that he had shot one of R.M. Chamber cattle, crippling the same, and that he, S.A. Early, would shoot R.M. Chambers' cattle again if he did not keep them out of his corn.
According to this account from a white man, Mr. Moran, who was the landlord in which Sonnie lived, he's telling us the cow has come into Sonnie's corn. Well, that's his sustenance. That's his food. If the cow kills his corn, he's killing his family. And so the story of the cow takes on a very different tone.
Right.
If you don't have corn, your kids don't eat.
You don't eat. So he has a justifiable reason to be indignant.
Absolutely.
Coupled with the fact that he was a conjurer.
Absolutely.
Who believed you couldn't touch him anyway. And he was above it all.
And he had some evidence to the fact that he could
He'd been
survive
shot
anything that
4 times
they
at
throw
least,
at
you
him. Indeed.
Once in the face and 3 other times, we don't know where.
That's right.
He's a strong man.
A very strong man.
My mind is swimming. I mean, I think of the type of character that he must have been. I think of the internal strength and fortitude. I think of that maverick of sorts that thinks outside the box and lives, by his own credo. Sonnie is, from what I see, is a man who could not be broken.
I'll never know for sure why Sonnie ended up in a mental hospital, but he was shot 4 times defending his rights and was clearly never going to give up. So, for his white neighbors, maybe the easiest way to get rid of him was to commit him to a mental hospital.
I see my 3 times great-grandfather, someone who was connected to the spirit world and was a leader amongst people and was well known in the community, who was a colorful character, as actors are known to be. I find great solace in that. So I'm very, very proud to know that I have a great-great-great-grandfather named Sonnie Early, who many thought was crazy and was obviously much more than they could have ever imagined.
Now that I know the dramatic story of Sonnie Early, I'm shifting my focus to another branch of my mom's family tree. Since I found Sonnie through my maternal great-grandfather, Harry Royal, I'd like to learn as much as I can about Harry's wife, Ada Bell White. From her marriage record, I know Ada's parents were Thomas and Mary White. I'm heading back to Lynchburg to reconnect with Joseph Shumway. I'm curious to see what clues he's been able to find out about this side of my family tree.
Blair Underwood is in Virginia, researching another branch of his mother's lineage.
I'm back in Lynchburg with Joseph Shumway, who has been researching the White family for me.
I understand you have information about Ada White, who's married to Harry Royal.
I was able to locate a death certificate for her mother, Mary White. She died here in Lynchburg in 1917.
County of Campbell, Lynchburg, born in 1862. Father was Delaware Scott. That's new information, I believe.
So what I'd like to do now that we have this name is see if we can identify Delaware Scott and his family in the U.S. federal censuses. So we're here at ancestry.com. In the location, let's type in Campbell County, Virginia.
Let's see, hold on a second, let me see.
Yeah.
Easier.
I like to always check the 1860 census just in case we do get lucky and find an African-American ancestor in that census.
Click on here.
Uh-huh.
Are we gonna hit that wall again?
We might hit the wall again.
Delaware, okay, Delaware Scott. If you go beyond 1870, unless you were a freed slave, you couldn't be found in an 1860 census, right?
Right.
So he's got to be free.
Right.
That's pretty incredible. So how did you become free? 35, male. Okay, so mulatto here.
Right.
Cooper? No, okay.
Cooper, right.
What is a Cooper?
Cooper was a barrel maker. There was a lot of need for things to carry material in, so.
Now, tobacco was big around here, right? I mean, anything.
It was.
Value of real estate. So wait a minute, so he's 800. Oh, his real estate.
He owns real estate.
He owns real estate, so he was a property owner in 1860.
Right.
So these are all Scots.
Right.
Julia A. Scott, William Scott. He's 35.
And this Judith woman, she's 67. Her last name's Scott.
Judith was probably Delaware's mother.
Possibly.
Possibly. I am loving this ride. Okay.
It's really incredible to learn that my 3 times great-grandfather, Delaware Scott, was a free black man before the end of slavery and was a landowner to boot. Now I'm very curious. How did Delaware Scott and his mother Judith, who was also listed in the 1860 census, become free? To get some of my questions answered, Joseph suggested I head back to Richmond and meet with historian Dr. Eva Shepard-Wolf.
This is a register of free Negroes. And in it are names of people who came to the county clerk to register and prove their status as free Negroes, and that was the terminology of the time.
Right.
So it's more than what you would get in a census,
Sure.
for example, because there's some personal details.
Right.
So we're in 1849.
11 more years. Delaware Scott, son of Judith Scott, dark mulatto, 26 years old, 5 feet 11 inches high, which is my height, born free. He was born free.
Yeah.
How is that possible?
Well, so we know he was born free in the 1820s, which means his mother had to be free.
Is that a foregone conclusion?
That's a foregone conclusion,
Okay.
because your status comes from your mother.
Ah, that's very cool.
Yeah.
So he was born free in
He was born free in 1823.
Okay.
And there were thousands of free blacks in Virginia in 1823.
Thousands?
Thousands.
Because you often hear about freed blacks during that period of time.
Right. In 1782, they passed a law that allowed anybody in Virginia who wanted to free a slave, as long as the slave was not a child, and not elderly, which meant over 45, sorry to say. And if they did it by deed, so a deed like a deed that you would draw up to transfer land or something like that, or by will. But this doesn't tell us anything about how his ancestors became free. We just know he was born free, which in fact Delaware was kept track of another time. And this one's from 1852.
Amherst County Clerk's Office, September 5th, 1852. Delaware Scott, there he is. Born free in the county of Amherst of ancestors free before the first day of May 1806, so 50 years prior to this.
Yes. So Delaware Scots, ancestors, your ancestors, free before 1806.
That's extraordinary.
1st May 1806 refers to a specific law. It's actually very important that if you were freed after May 1st, 1806, you had to leave Virginia within 1 year. If they don't, they can be taken up by county officials and sold back into slavery.
What?
So the free black registers became, in addition to a way to just track people and kind of keep tabs on people, a way to make sure that people had a right to be in Virginia. These are also having to do with free Negro and slave records. You want to try to read that?
This is to certify that I was acquainted with Amy Umble's sent years or
60 years or upwards.
Or upwards. She had 2 daughters, Judd and Libby.
I think it's Tabby. I think it's a T.
Tabby.
I think that's
You're
Judy.
She married something Scott.
That's an S and that's an L, so it's an abbreviation for Samuel.
Okay, Samuel Scott. They were free persons of color. From my earliest acquaintance with them, I never heard their freedom called into question.
So Judy, Delaware Scott's mother, married Samuel Scott.
Gotcha.
So
okay.
This then is your great-great-great-great-grandfather. So now you have Delaware Scott's parents, both of them.
Right. Do we know why this was written?
This is Guy Lee, a white man of some respect in the community, a tradesman, coming to say, I know this family.
I'll vouchsafe for this family.
I'll vouch for them.
Right.
Ever since I knew them, for more than 60 years, they were free, back to the 1790s now. So
we were able to track all the way back to at least information to the late 1790s.
Right. The free people in the 1790s.
The free people in the 1790s?
1790s.
Free people in Virginia.
Yeah, 215 years ago.
That blows me away.
To have ancestors in the 18th and 19th centuries who were born free is a monumental discovery. I am so proud to be descended from this family. My 3 times great-grandfather, Delaware Scott, and his mother, Judith, both born free. And Delaware's father, Samuel, and his grandmother, Amy, who were living free in the Virginia South. It's remarkable.
So we actually do know a little bit more about the Scott family, but it's not here. We have to go back to Lynchburg.
We have to go back to Lynchburg?
Gotta go back to Lynchburg.
I can't wait.
I'm hoping to find out more about Samuel Scott and his family, my family, and I'd like to be able to connect some more of these dots. Eva and I are going to the Court Street Baptist Church, the first African-American church of its kind in Lynchburg. Eva tells me the Scott family was instrumental in building this congregation.
So if you remember, we saw that Judith, was married to a Samuel Scott.
Right.
And this is a stack of land deeds. This is all having to do with buying and selling land. It's really buying. Samuel Scott was buying land. Delaware Scott's father was buying land.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what year we're talking about?
1815.
A free black man
Who owned land
here in Virginia.
Right.
Do we know how many acres?
Around 200.
200 acres?
That's a lot.
That's a lot of land.
Yeah. And we have tax records.
Ah, okay.
So there are several columns here. And so you can see quite a few of the people have slaves that they're paying taxes on.
All right, Samuel Scott. He had 2 slaves? So Samuel had 2 slaves.
Yep, that's that
He
column.
owned
You're
his
right.
own slave.
Blair Underwood is in Lynchburg, digging into his mother's deep Virginia family history. He just found out his 4 times great-grandfather, Samuel Scott, was free decades before emancipation, but he owned 2 slaves.
I'm curious about the relationship between the free people of color and the slaves.
Well, and I think it really varied from situation to situation and person to person, but we can actually learn more about them through the census records, because this just tells us that he had them. It doesn't tell us anything about them. Okay, this is
the 1840 census.
1840 census. So you've seen another census where it lists everybody by name, and they don't list people by name here. Just the heads of household, which kind of shows how they thought of society. It was the head of household that was important.
That mattered.
But they were interested in the demographics, you know,
Right.
and what the ages of people are.
Yeah, so we have Samuel Scott here, then we have slaves. They have 1 male slave, between 55 and 100.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
What does that
there
tell
were
us?
2 slaves in 1838. There weren't actually any slaves in the tax records before that. 2 in 1839. By 1840, there's only 1 slave, and that slave is over 55. If you're going to own slaves to work your land, you're not going to purchase somebody over 55.
Okay.
That's an old slave.
That's an
right?
old slave.
That's not somebody who's going to
Okay.
help you do it. So the most, and what I know statistically, is that most free black slave owners in Virginia owned family members.
Now that is interesting. Free people of color would buy family members who were slaves in order to take care of them.
Right, in order to
Right.
have them be able to live as free people. Remember, after 1806, if a slave is freed, that slave has to leave Virginia.
After May 1st, 1806, right.
If you're freed after May 1st of 1806, then you have 1 year that you can stay in Virginia
Get your stuff and get to stepping.
and leave.
Right.
But if you're still a slave and you're
Right.
owned by your family
You
member,
can stay.
You can stay.
And ideally, it's a family member who you love, you'll take care of them.
Right.
But their status will remain as a slave.
Their status remains as a slave.
You're blowing my mind right now.
So you
but it
have-
makes sense. You take care of your own.
You take care of your own. But we know there were 2 in 1838. There were 2 in 1839. Now there's only 1.
Right.
And so we can guess that that other one might have been a similar age and might have died by this point, by 1840. So it's very possible that they were his parents.
Yep. To me, it's beautiful and profound and eye-opening because it's part of my history. Phenomenal. The fact that he took care of his family like that, because family to me has always been the most important thing in my life. So you take care of your own.
Yeah.
You look out for your own.
Yeah.
And I see that he did that. I look at now my 4 times great-grandfather, Samuel Scott, the fact that he was looking out for these people and taking care of them. It's empowering to know that. What else has been illuminating is that there are such deep roots in this state of Virginia that I had no idea about. So now it makes sense why I feel like such a Virginian.
Unfortunately, this is where the trail for the Scotts ends. And while I got nearly 100 years further back than most, I finally hit that wall. There aren't any more records that can tell me how Samuel Scott and Amy Umbles became free. But my mom is really gonna love learning all this information about her family. And on my dad's side, I just got word that the results of my DNA test are in. So I'm meeting with Dr. Kenneth Shaheen here in Lynchburg.
A good way to think of your DNA is links on a very long chain. And so what we're able to do is read approximately 700,000 links. So it gives us sort of a unique DNA fingerprint, if you will. So the first thing we found was that your DNA is comprised of approximately 74% African DNA and about 26% European DNA. Now, that may be a surprise, but as it turns out, most African Americans have a significant portion of European DNA. And your 26% actually is fairly typical. I wouldn't say it's high and I wouldn't say it's low. So you're in that normal range, okay? So when we look at your European DNA, what we find is that you're most closely related to people that come from the region of France, Switzerland, and Germany.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Why is that?
Well, it's hilarious because I've always felt a connection to France especially, got engaged in Paris, named our first child after the city of Paris. African first, I've always said that. Africa first, and then French culture. I don't know why, never knew why.
That's interesting. So then, we did the same thing to the African. And what we find here is that you're associated with several tribes that are predominantly found in the western part of Africa. So then we did one more thing.
Okay.
We asked, where would we find your closest DNA matches? And when we did that, what we found was a gentleman who's your cousin.
What?
We've compared your DNA to his, okay?
Right.
And clearly you shared a common relative on the paternal side, right around 1600 or 1700 and the slave trade.
So my cousin is Eric Sonjowo.
Right.
From Babungo?
Babungo, Cameroon.
Babungo, Cameroon.
We had Eric in a database, which is why we were able to compare your DNA fingerprint to his.
It's mind-boggling. It is absolutely mind-boggling.
We've made contact with him, and he is looking forward to meeting you and introducing you to his father and the rest of his family.
I'm going to Cameroon?
Absolutely.
Yes! Yes! That blows me away.
Blair Underwood is in Africa, fulfilling his lifelong dream of taking his father to their ancestral homeland. Blair and his father are on their way to meet Blair's distant cousin Eric and Eric's father in the tiny village of Babungo, where the family is awaiting the Underwoods' arrival.
Wow. Wow. Isn't that something? Looking like family for real. Wow. This is amazing. Ah! You Eric? Ah! Eric? Yeah, man. Oh, man. Man, it's good to see you. Come here, man. Come here, brother. Ah. Oh, thank you.
Good to see you, buddy. Thank you so much for making this happen.
This is amazing. This is amazing. Where's your father? Which one is your father? This is my father. This is my father. Family. Who is Eric? We cannot thank you enough for making all of this possible. Let me tell you why it's special for us. Because we know in America that we were separated from you as a family. And we always in America, there's a void because we were forced migration to America.
Okay.
And our families were separated. Do you know anything about that in terms of your ancestors when they may have left this country?
Well, I think the transatlantic slave trade that a lot of Africans to the United States and other parts of the world. It was a very inhuman trade, and it wasn't documented because nobody wanted to have his or her name kept on record. And then it is very difficult to trace where those people come from because slaves were collected from all over Cameroon.
What made you take the DNA test in the first place?
It was in 2005. Yeah, one girl came towards me and said that there is a test going on. Black people there in America are trying to trace their family back.
Oh, that's what they said to you?
Yeah, she said to me. But when they called me and they told me the thing, I was very shocked because I never expected anything from it. It's been quite a long time.
Well, today is that day.
Today is that day.
And because of you, we come full circle and we reunite with the family, with you.
Yeah.
So that is an honor, and that's very humbling to us.
Yeah. We have a large family in the United States, and we've been there for quite a while, but we never had a connection to Africa.
Okay.
And you make that connection for us, and it's reality. So I cannot say how strongly I feel about that. Maybe someday you can come and visit us and the family members, and to grow as family.
We wanted to give you a picture of our family in America, which is your family. So you know what they look like. So hopefully when you come to America, or any of you, you'll meet them, or when I bring them back here. Either way. You know what I'm saying?
The journey has been much more than I ever expected. I've learned so much. I always knew I was from Virginia, but I uncovered people like Sonnie Early and Samuel Scott, a free man of color. These are proud, dignified people on both sides. So what I would share with my children is you come from a long line of people with these values. To actually be able to travel all these miles and to meet my cousin face to face, it's the family coming full circle. It's reuniting the family that was broken. I feel as though certain voids are filled that I never realized I had. But for me, we're African, not because we're born in Africa, but because Africa was born in us. Or who I thought I was when we started this odyssey is different than who I know I am today. It's been incredible.
W, pole?
W stands for white, and pole is representing an individual. In North Carolina, what they did was they taxed adult white men. And that probably referred to George Brassfield himself as the owner of that property.
And the B pole?
B pole stands for black pole, women and men between the ages of 12 and 52.
So that would mean he had 10 slaves?
That's right, 10 slaves on his property.
Beloved as the queen of country, singer Reba McEntire is the best-selling female country music artist of all time. Reba's talents have taken her far beyond the world of music, most notably in her award-winning hit sitcom, Reba. Reba and her husband Narvel Blackstock live in Nashville, Tennessee, where their son Shelby and Narvel's children Shauna, Brandon, and Chastity visit often. Reba credits her upbringing amongst the cowboys of Oklahoma for her success in the music industry.
I think one of the things that really helped me be prepared, as little as I was, for the music business was being in a man's world, not only in the ranching business, but the rodeo business. I was one of Daddy's hired hands, and what I got paid was room and board. I think that experience from the other worlds that I lived in did help me in the music business. I know I get my strength from Mama and Daddy. My mama is feisty. She is a hardworking woman. She is very strong. Going through all the research and writing my autobiography, I just learned a lot more about Daddy's side, and I don't know that much about Mama's side. I guess I just didn't ask enough questions. I want to know where we came from. I want to know what makes me tick. Why am I like I am? I would love to go back as far back as possible. I am very interested in knowing who the first of my ancestors were to step on the United States of America. Because I go to Europe and sometimes I don't feel welcome, and then I go to other parts and I feel like, man, this is home. Ireland, Scotland, but then England, I feel like, ooh, I feel a little on guard. I'm going to take this opportunity now to ask Mama about her side of the family. So I'll start this journey at my parents' ranch in Stringtown, Oklahoma. I'm hoping that Mama can tell me a little bit more about my grandmother, Reba Estelle Brassfield Smith, and maybe even her parents, who I don't know anything about.
Out of the way, big boys. I'm doing this for Mama. Mama went to Nashville for me, to help me get in the music business. Now, I've got something that I can give back to Mama. I like that. Hey, Mama. How you doing today?
Real good.
Love you.
Love you too, sweetheart.
I got some stuff to go over with you. You know, growing up with Daddy being a world champion steer roper and the McEntire name and everything, I, for some reason, always knew more about Daddy's side of the family than I did about your side of the family. This is really interesting to me, taking this journey to find out more about Reba Estelle Brassfield Smith, your mama, my namesake.
This
is you and your namesake, Reba.
What did she think about you naming me after her?
Oh, she was pleased.
Did she like that?
She loved you kids, loved all of you. I named all of you after grandparents.
Yeah.
This is an old picture. I'm so glad that we have this.
Yeah, because I've never seen this picture before.
This is my grandma, Susie. This is BW.
So is this Grandma Reba?
Evidently she's tired because she
Sound
it
asleep?
looks like she's asleep. She was a very strong woman. But he is most handsome, BW.
Do you know why he died?
He had TB. They built him a store to make a living because he couldn't do hard physical work.
Where was it?
Monroe County.
In Mississippi?
Uh-huh.
Were they wealthy?
May have been, but I just don't know much about them.
Well then, Mama, let's see if we can find some clues about the Brassfields online.
Have a little thing called ancestry.com that we can look at here. It's really cool. All right, we're gonna do a general search here, and we're going to look for Reba Brassfield lived in, and the location here is Monroe County, Mississippi. Search. All results for Reba Estelle Brassfield. 13th Census of the United States, 1910 population. There's Reba, age 6, and Susie, her mom. So here it says head of the household, white, 39 years old, and, widowed.
So BW must have died not long after that family photo was taken.
Let's go back to the 1900 census and try to find
BW.
Let's try to find him. All right, all results for BW Brassfield. So here's a bunch of them. A lot of them in Mississippi. JG, John B, Sally, Betty. He's not here.
You just have to go down there and look.
To Monroe County, Mississippi? All right, I'll go find out for us, all right?
Bring back all the information you can.
I'll do it.
I was really excited about coming back here to Stringtown, Oklahoma to see my mama, get to hug her neck. And she told me that B.W. Brassfield is my great-grandfather. I didn't know that. I didn't know his name. I hit a bit of a dead end in my online search, so I'm heading to the city of Aberdeen in Monroe County, Mississippi, to see what I can find in the local records. I'm going to meet with a genealogist at the Evans Memorial Library, but before he arrives, I want to see what I can find out on my own. I'm starting my search for B.W. Brassfield in the early 1900s obituaries.
Oh, all right, Mr. Brassfield, where are you? A.B. Brassfield, B.R.A. Joseph. Miss Betty Brassfield, but no B.W. And Jonas obituaries. Not in here.
Reba McEntire is in Monroe County, Mississippi, looking for her great-grandfather, B.W. Brassfield. She's hit a dead end after searching the census and obituaries.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I'm Reba.
I'm Josh Taylor.
Hey, Josh.
Now, Reba is hoping genealogist Josh Taylor's investigation into the Brassfields has been more successful.
I went to see my mother, and she was telling me about my great-grandfather, B.W. Brassfield.
Okay.
So I came down here and looked in the obituaries, and he's not in the obituaries.
All right. Well, I will tell you that I did find BW. It took a little bit of work. In fact, that's a lie. It took a lot of work. It's difficult research.
Yeah.
But I do have something for you.
Oh, good.
That might hold some answers.
Okay. Wow, you have been doing some work. That is incredible. So Reba, that's my grandmother, was born 1903, B.W. died September 12th in 1906 in Monroe County, Mississippi. But we didn't find him in the obituaries.
We know B.W. Brassfield was a farmer,
Uh-huh.
so his family probably couldn't afford an obituary. And one thing you'll notice with the Brassfields here, you spell it with 2 S's, and B.W. spelled it differently.
Uh-huh.
When people were writing names, they probably didn't write them themselves, so they relied on someone else to actually spell the name. You might find it with 1 ish, you might find it with 2 S's, it just depends. As you go along in your research, you have to, keep that in mind.
This tree goes all the way back to my 4 times great-grandfather, George Brassfield.
See, I wasn't expecting this. I was expecting, B.W. and then 1 back. And here you've given me 3 more back. This is a lot to comprehend right now for me. George Brassfield, born at about 1765 in Wake County, North Carolina.
He also was born before the American Revolution. So he would have been a child when independence was declared.
Wow.
And would have grown up during the War of Independence.
Wow. So George Brassfield was Wake County, North Carolina. You can't really pinpoint a town, can
Well,
you?
what I can pinpoint is that there were some very interesting things happening in Wake County about this time period, and you really ought to visit.
That's my next stop, huh?
I would recommend it.
Yeah, okay, good. I feel really tickled about knowing who my 4 times great-grandfather is, George Brassfield. That's incredible. I'm the first one in my family to know that. What brought him to North Carolina? Was he a prominent man in society? Was he well thought of, or was he a scoundrel? That's the kind of stuff I want to look into and see what they thought about him.
So I'm taking my search to Raleigh, the state capital, in Wake County, North Carolina. I'm going to meet historian Phil Otterness at the State Archives to find out what was going on in this area when George Brassfield lived here.
Thank you very much for meeting me here. I have come over to try to find out more about my 4 times great-grandfather, George Brassfield. He was born in Wake County in 1765. That was before we gained our independence.
It was a time when this area was just being settled. And if we jump ahead a little bit to when he was a young man in North Carolina, they decided to build the state capital in Wake County. There was no Raleigh here at all, and they were going to carve it out of farmland.
Uh-huh.
Why don't we look at this?
Okay.
Here's the plan of the city of Raleigh, 1817. So here you can see the State House, or the Capitol there. They have this grand street. One of the things that's interesting here, you see the governor's palace.
Oh, governor got a palace there. Wow, uptown. I'm looking for old George. Oh, ta-da-da. There he is, George Brassfield, lot number 15. What was on this land?
Let's move to the land records. So the records are contained in this book. It's dated quite a bit later, 1846 to 1849.
So, it's kind of falling apart here just a little bit. Wow, incredible.
This document comes to us from a period about 20 years after George Brassfield, your 4-time great-grandfather, had died.
Uh-huh.
But it talks about the property that he had in the town of Raleigh.
Okay, state of North Carolina. Boy, a lot of description here. Okay, here's known as Brassfield Old Tavern Lot. So he owned a bar.
That's right.
No wonder I'm so comfortable singing honky tonks all the time. That's hysterical. So he must have had a little bit of money, been kind of well off to own a business like that. Did he have any other properties?
The best place to look for that is in the tax records.
Okay. Wake County tax lists, 1781 to 1860. So, whoa, these are delicate looking. 1803, no Brassfield. So it jumps to 1910. A list of the taxables and taxable property in Lick Creek District. You gotta love that. 1810. There it is. George Brassfield, Esquire. Land, 1,615 acres?
That's right.
And 3/4. So that's land. What do these take care of? W, pole?
W stands for white, and pole is representing an individual. In North Carolina, what they did was they taxed adult white men. And that probably referred to George Brassfield himself as the owner of that property.
And the B pole?
B pole stands for black pole, women and men between the ages of 12 and 52.
So that would mean he had 10 slaves?
That's right, 10 slaves on his property.
Reba McEntire is in Raleigh, North Carolina, where she just found out her 4 times great-grandfather, George Brassfield, was a respected land and business owner. But George also owned 10 slaves.
You know, that's such a wild thinking nowadays of owning a person. And I would like to know, did he treat them well? Was he a fair plantation owner? Is there any way I can find that out?
Well, we can't find it out from this particular document. But if you go to the Granville County Courthouse in Oxford, they have additional records on the slaves, and I think you'll be able to find out more there.
Okay.
Today, I've learned that my 4 times great-grandfather, George Brassfield, was a slave owner. You know, you read it in the history books and you see it in movies and television shows, but to know that your ancestors were slave owners, it does put it in a different perspective. I'm heading to the Granville County Courthouse, 40 miles north of here, which holds slave records for the region where George Brassfield lived. I'm hoping to find some kind of documentation that will help me understand my 4 times great-grandfather's role as a slave owner. So I'm meeting with North Carolina historian Harry Watson, who has been looking into this for me.
One of the first places to start will actually be in newspapers. We can look for George right here on the computer.
No kidding.
Masters took out ads in the paper about slaves a lot.
I'm gonna put in Brassfield and George. George Brassfield.
Bingo.
North Carolina.
North Carolina, 1820.
Notice, on the night of the 5th, came a traveling black man and took up for the night in one of my Negro houses. After my having notice of it, I took him under examination and he called himself Willie Tripp. The matter seemed somewhat suspicious, but in the morning he was gone, and induces me to believe him a runaway slave. Willie Tripp was evidently a runaway slave trying to get to freedom.
Yeah, yeah. And George Brassfield tried to stop it.
Did he get away?
We don't know.
Hope he did.
We don't know, yeah. We have, it turns out, some records about George Brassfield and his slaves that come from different courthouses. This one is from Wake County. It's a bill of sale.
Sold and delivered unto the said George Brassfield, one certain Negro man, known by the name of Davy, about 26 years of age. So he's bought a slave.
Yes, he has.
George Brassfield selling something to Benjamin Hobson, a girl by the name of Rachel, about 20 years of age, with her increase, her baby? A child?
That means all the babies she will ever have.
Wow. Sum of $300 silver dollars.
So $300. $300.
Oh, he's a slave trader.
He is.
George is selling Peter. Now about 3 years old. Selling him a 3-year-old kid?
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you sell a child? Why would you sell a child? You don't have an idea of why? Okay.
There's one more document, which is the record of deeds.
Okay, looks like for the sum of 20 pounds, Virginia money, paid by George Brassfield, one certain Negro girl by the name of Amy, now about 14
months of age. Really? 14-month-old baby. That's a year, 2 months. Wow. Whew, that's pretty sobering.
What it shows is that slavery wasn't this weird thing tucked over in the corner that all the rest of us didn't have anything to do with. It's right in our pasts. All the white people were the ancestors that go back that far. It's something that we have to talk about, and you can't have healing without acknowledgement.
Absolutely. When I found out that my 4 times great-grandfather was trading children, it broke my heart. To be taken away from your parents, from your home, and just, there you go, you're at another place. To know that that mama never will see that baby again, or that little boy will never see his mama and daddy again. That broke my heart. That little time machine would sure come in handy to be able to say, George, what was going on? Why'd you do this? I'd love to know. But I found out all I can about George Brassfield. When I started my search, I wanted to know who the first person was in Mama's family to step foot on American soil. To find out, Harry recommended I go to Tappahannock, Virginia, to see a colleague of his, Warren Hofstra. He's been looking into my family's history for me, so I'm meeting him at the Essex County Courthouse. I have found out quite a bit about my 4 times great-grandfather, George Brassfield. And I wanted to know who were the first of my ancestors to come to North America.
The name Brassfield is a very unique name, and that helps us a great deal. We can confirm that your 6th time great-grandfather was also George Brassfield.
Wow.
We can go that much farther back.
Lots of Georges in there.
Lots of Georges.
Warren has traced my mother's family line back 2 more generations to another George Brassfield. And Warren says he has a land deed from 1721 that can tell me a little bit more about who my 6 times great-grandfather was. That is beautiful. This indenture, made this 16th day of May in the year of our Lord 1721, between Richard Carver and George Brassfield for 1,500 pounds of tobacco. That's a lot of tobacco. What do you get out of all that? 300 acres. It's a good parcel of land.
So with this purchase of land, George Brassfield became a landowner in early Virginia.
Yeah, so early on into the beginning of the United States. So where did he get his money? Was his family wealthy? Did he inherit a lot of money?
He worked for it.
Okay.
I think we have a document to help us understand much better about his origins and how he came to the point where he could acquire enough land to become a substantial member of the community in Essex County. This is a book that records all of the decisions that the Court of Essex County made.
Orders 1695 to 1699, Essex County. Wow, 1600s. That's going back a ways. George Brassfield, servant boy to Mr. Bernard Gaines. Wow. Is adjudged 9 years of age and the same ordered to be recorded. So what, do we know why he was working for Mr. Gaines?
He was an indentured servant.
At 9 years old.
Reba McEntire is in Virginia, searching for the first person in her mother's family to come to America. Reba just learned her 6 times great-grandfather was an indentured servant at the age of 9.
Your 6th great-grandfather had signed a contract to pay for the expenses of coming to Virginia. And he had agreed to work for a certain term of years. Okay. That's what the indenture was.
In the early 1600s, Jamestown, Virginia was established as the first permanent English colony, and driven by the production of tobacco, it became the birthplace of indentured servitude. As the first American slaves, many indentured servants were young boys and girls contracted to serve a set number of years, often until they turned 21, after which they would be awarded their independence. By the time George Brassfield arrived in the late 1600s, African slaves and indentured servants worked side by side in the tobacco fields in roughly equal numbers. Though servitude was clearly better than slavery, the work was brutal and living conditions were poor. Fewer than half of all indentured servants survived their contracts to become free citizens.
As a 9-year-old boy, under the terms of the indenture or the contract, he has to work until he is 21.
So what did he have to do? What was expected of a 9-year-old boy to pay off his debt?
Bernard Gaines owned land
Okay.
In Essex County, and he farmed that land, and he grew tobacco. So he would help with the planting of the tobacco, the cutting of the tobacco. This was hard life.
Hard work. I find this very interesting that my 6 times great-grandfather was an indentured servant, and then his grandson, my 4 times great-grandfather, owned slaves.
But there are important differences.
Yes, the indentured servant saw the light at the end of the tunnel of being free someday, and the slaves, they didn't have that hope.
They would serve their entire life.
Right.
And their children would serve in perpetuity.
But again, where did he come from? Why is he by himself, a 9-year-old boy? Where's his mom and dad?
Let's see what we can find out about George Brassfield.
So just type in his name. List of immigrants to America from Liverpool, 1697 to 1707. The names of the servants that goes to Virginia in the Loyalty, Captain Henry Brown, commander, October 19th, 1698.
The Loyalty is the name of the ship, and Henry Brown is the captain.
Commander of the ship. Servants that goes to Virginia. There's George Brassfield. B-R-A-S-F-E-I-L-D. Good lands, they've changed it several times.
They did.
This says 11 years, but here we know he's 9.
Actually, what this means is that he has 11 years to serve. So this would suggest he was 10 years old.
Instead of 9, but the document says he's 9.
Sometimes, well, unscrupulous masters would shave a year off.
So he would work longer.
Work another year.
Wow.
See, there's 37 of them altogether.
And there's no other Brassfield on here. He came over here by himself.
It was a dangerous voyage. 3 or 4 months.
This bothers me. I don't know where his mama is. If he had a mama at that time. To send my son on a ship like that, I'd be kicking and screaming all the way to the dock. I don't get this. I don't understand it. And if she was there, my heart goes out to her too. Oh my gosh, this breaks my heart. For me to be living in the United States of America, he had to pay that price of coming over by himself with a bunch of other kids. Him being around the age of 9 years old, traveling on a ship 3 months from England to the shores of North America by himself. I just cannot imagine what he went through. And even though there was no hometown listed for young George on the passenger list, Warren pointed out that many of the kids who were on the boat with George were from Cheshire County. So I'm heading to Chester, England to look in the county records. After I found out that my 6 times great-grandfather was from England and that he was an indentured servant, does that explain why I feel so weird every time I go to England? I've got to find out what happened.
Reba McEntire is in Chester, England. She's just discovered that her 6 times great-grandfather, George Brassfield, was sent to the American colonies as an indentured servant when he was just a boy. She's come to the Cheshire County Records Office to meet with Brett Langston.
Well, Brett, I have come a long way to find out some more information on George Brassfield.
Brassfield, okay.
I do know that he came to the colonies in 1698 as a young boy, and I just wanted to come over here and find some more information as to why.
Yeah.
Why did he leave, and where did he live here, and anything else I can find out?
Well, best place to start is some computer indexes that we have of Cheshire records.
Okay.
So we can start with one of those, if you like.
Sure.
And got this here. So
Cheshire Parish Register Project.
That's right. We want his baptism, his christening record. So we start with that one.
To baptism.
Put the surname in there.
Fingers crossed. Hold your breath. 4 records found. Georgius.
Georgius, Latin for George.
Okay, so where do we go next?
I will go and get a christening record and we'll see if there's any more information in there.
Wonderful. Georgius, Georgius. It's amazing how you can just find somebody.
Well, I have good news. We've found George's baptism record, and there's a few more things besides.
Okay.
Would you like to have a look?
Yes,
Yeah,
definitely.
Okay. Now, this is the original volume from 1688.
Yeah.
And this has George's christening entry in it. Because you're wearing nail polish, we just ask if you put some gloves on.
No problem. Okay. Georgius Thomas Brassfield de
Mac. George, son of Thomas Brassfield of Macclesfield.
So has his father's name Thomas?
His father was Thomas, yeah.
All right. So this is the 17th of June.
Yes.
That's when he was born.
That's when he was christened.
Okay, 2
sometime-
things I want to know.
2 months.
When was he born and what's his mother's name?
Normally they're christened a short time after they were born.
A week?
So it could be a week, a couple of months, but not usually more than 2 or 3 months. But we might be able to help with the mother's name.
Okay.
There is a marriage record for Thomas Brassfield some years before this. So
Okay.
if I'll just move that out of your way.
1688.
1688.
Now that's not paper. What is that?
This is a form of parchment they were using at the time. Yeah. You can see it's very delicate, so we'll open it quite carefully.
Oh, you just look like it's going to crackle like a dry leaf.
So it starts with christenings, and you have burials, and you have marriages here.
Weddings. John Thomas. Wow, that's a little bitty print. That right there, Thomas. Oh, that is Brassfield. I couldn't read that. Thomas Brassfield, Abigail. So now we know the mom and dad. We know George, when he was born.
Yeah.
And I know when he left to go to the colonies.
Yeah.
I just don't know why he left.
Right.
Is there a death record of mom and dad?
Yes.
That could help answer my question.
Now, this is a register from 1720, and a list of people buried at Macclesfield.
Thomas Brassfield. That means June the 30th of 1720, he died.
That's the date he was buried, so he died
Buried.
a day or 2 before then.
Okay.
No longer than that.
His father died when he was already in America. It still doesn't answer my question. Why did he leave? Why a 9 or 10-year-old kid was put on that boat?
Yeah.
So what about his mother? Had she already passed?
This is another Macclesfield St. Michael register.
1696.
1696.
Abigail. Oh, you can barely see that. Wife of Thomas Brassfield. So 1696, when young George's mother passed away.
That's right.
And he left in 98 to go to
Yes.
the colonies.
That's right.
But his father was still around.
Until 1720, yes.
His father sent his son away to the Americas at 9 years old, 10 years old?
That's how it seems.
Why? Why did they do things like that back then? Didn't he have money to take care of him?
So I think to answer that question, you'll need to go to Macclesfield and find out a bit more there.
I mean, I couldn't even send Shelby to summer camp. Old Thomas. All right, before I get mad at him, I got to find out some more facts before I start drawing too many early conclusions. Thank you for showing me these documents.
You're welcome.
Great to know.
I got a little heated up when I found out that George's mother passed away, and then 2 years later, he's off to America on a little bitty boat. Why would a father do that?
So I'm heading 40 miles east to Macclesfield to the church where my 6 times great-grandfather George was christened and his parents were buried.
Wow. To find out why George was sent overseas, I'm meeting with historian James Horn, who has been looking into the Brassfield family.
Very nice to meet you. I've come here to Macclesfield to try to find out why my 6-time great-grandfather left at 10 years old to go to the colonies while his father was still alive. Can you shed any light on him becoming an indentured servant?
Well, I think it's quite likely that because his mother had died, that his father Thomas would have had a pretty hard time. And it was uncommon at this time for men to look after the children anyway. He certainly couldn't afford to send George to school or university. Apprenticeships were expensive, so there weren't many good options for him. But there was one, and the one he took was to indenture young George. That might offer him a chance of a better future, whereas maybe if he'd stayed in Macclesfield, he really wouldn't have had much of a future ahead of him. Do we know what happened to George in the colonies?
He had purchased 300 acres of land, and it cost him 1,500 pounds of tobacco.
That's really amazing.
Yes.
Because so few indentured servants made it into being landowners and owning their own plantations. And there wouldn't have been any chance he would ever have owned land in England, and certainly not 300 acres. That was a big estate here in England. So he entered the realm of a propertied landowner only in America.
Great. Good for him.
And about 150 years after George sets up his own plantation, there's hundreds of Brassfields living in America. And as far as we know, they're all descended from young George.
So we have a lot to thank Thomas for sending his son over.
I think you do in particular.
I definitely do. If it wasn't for that, I wouldn't be here.
Absolutely.
Now, there's one thing else I'd like to do. I'd like to see where my 7-time great-grandmother and grandfather, Thomas and Abigail, are buried.
If you'd like to come outside.
Oh, please show me.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'll lead the way.
This is interesting. What are these?
These are headstones, and they've been laid out flat. This is the graveyard. Some were here when Thomas and Abigail and young George were here.
Wow.
The whole community over generations and generations are buried here beneath us.
And where was Thomas buried?
Maybe over there in this grassy patch, because that's where the poorer people would have been buried, and maybe with just a simple wooden cross as a marker, or maybe no marker at all. But that's probably where they are. I'll leave you now and say goodbye.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah,
appreciate it very much.
Yeah. Bye now.
Wow. I just can't imagine losing your wife, sending your child off to a country and a place you never know what's going to happen. You'll never see him again. What a strong man Thomas was to do that. Thank you, Thomas, wherever you are. That takes guts to send your child off, never see him again. I ask for forgiveness for being mad at you, Thomas. I'm not mad at you anymore. I get a good feeling here, like I'm loved and protected. I'll come back.
Reba McEntire's journey into her mother's ancestry has come full circle, back to the family ranch in Stringtown, Oklahoma.
This journey has been one of the highlights of my life because it told me so much about my life and who I am, where I came from, the kind of people I came from. Strong people, survivors. My 6 times great-grandfather, George, was put on that little bitty ship, and then to see that That was George's only hope of really getting anywhere in life. And his dad saying, get on this boat and go make a life of your own. Be somebody.
Hello. I am really good.
And I'll live my dreams and my life through you, like my mama said for me when I was going to Nashville. So a huge similarity.
When we left Mississippi, we went to North Carolina, and that's where I learned about George Brassfield, my 4 times great-grandfather. 4 times back, that's how we got to.
That's unbelievable.
And what I did find out was that he was a very prominent man, but he also had 10 slaves.
Oh, really?
Then I found out that my 6-time great-grandfather was an indentured servant. It was pretty much like slavery,
Yeah.
except there was
really
kind of a
was.
light at the end of the tunnel for an indentured servant. He was put on a ship and sent away.
Yeah.
Then I remembered the slaves.
Yeah.
They were torn apart from their family also.
Oh, that was terrible.
Horrible.
Terrible.
Ignorance, I always say, is not knowing. Being afraid is not knowing. Scary is the unknown. And when you know, and when you're enlightened and educated and you know what's happened, you do understand a little bit more. And in my case, I understood a lot more.
We got a lot to learn. We have a lot to learn from our history.
We do. We really do.
Knowledge is pretty special to have.
Record keepers are often focused more on the sound of a last name than making sure the spelling was correct. Another reality is the fact that there were some census takers and others who just simply intentionally misspelled the names of African Americans because, in their view, blacks were irrelevant.
So we were second-class citizens, kind of.
Exactly.
Man. Plaintiff states since their marriage in about the year of 1919, the defendant abandoned her for more than 1 year. Wow. All right. Which one you want first? Y'all pick. Which one? You want this one, June? All about dinosaurs. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay. Say, some dinosaurs were as big as a bus.
Some dinosaurs were as big as a bus.
Good job, Joe.
Nicknamed the Bus, star running back Jerome Bettis spent 13 years in the NFL. In 2006, he led the Pittsburgh Steelers to a decisive Super Bowl victory before retiring a champion. A committed humanitarian, Jerome founded the Bus Stops Here Foundation to serve underprivileged children. He's gone on to work as a football analyst on TV and radio. Jerome currently lives in Atlanta, Georgia, with his wife Tramika Bettis and their 2 children, Jada and Jerome Jr.
Give me kiss. My family is everything to me. Growing up, we had a really tight-knit family, and it continued into when I started playing professionally. My entire NFL career, my mother and father made every single game for 13 years. I lost my father a few years ago. It was a devastating time. My dad was my role model, my hero. I do know now that every moment that you have is a gift. I was fortunate to learn about the Bettis side of the family from my father before he passed. But I know very little about my mother's side, the Bogarts. I'm sure my mother would want to learn more, and I definitely want to go back as far as I possibly can. But when you think about going back generation to generation, the one thought that always kind of crosses your mind is slavery. Obviously, you know, we didn't just find our way here. I got to go to Grandma Pumpkin's house, and she's going to tell me a little bit more about our family history. If we encounter dark moments in this journey, then, you know, so be it. I think the real gift is really knowing.
Well, good luck, honey, and we'll be here when we get back.
Okay.
Love you.
Love you. See you later. Bye. If the Bogart side of the family is where really I want to learn more about, the logical first step is my mother. So I'm headed to Detroit, Michigan to see my mom and her brother, my Uncle Butch. You know, Detroit has a special place in my heart because it's home. This is where I'm from. It's where the majority of my family is. Hey.
Hey.
How are you? All right. Good to be home.
Good to see you.
Yeah, let's go. Uncle, how you doing?
Hey, what's happening?
How's everything? You good?
Fist pump. Fist pump.
Fist pump. All right. How you been, though? You been good?
Yeah, I've been hanging in there. Just,
I'm here today to really kind of answer some questions or help answer some questions that I have. For some reason, I don't know, growing up, I didn't get that much information from the Bogard side of the family.
I guess I began with my parents, my mother, Mary Christine, and this is my father, that's Abram. He was the family man. He had this thing about the family being like a hand, and if you take the fingers, and fingers go all over everywhere, but when you ball them up into a fist, can't do nothing with him strong. And he took care of all his kids.
Yeah, Dad did. And this is Ruby. Ruby is my grandmother.
Ruby is your father's mother.
My father's mother.
What was your grandfather's name?
Bernett Bogard.
What happened to
We don't know.
Bernett?
From what I heard about Bernett was that he disappeared. Dad never said whatever happened to him, just that he disappeared from the family. The little bit that he did say was that he was, I guess, a rebel rouser back then. You know, I guess he kind of ran around.
Did he die?
See, that I don't know.
On the Bogard side, my mom is taking me back to my grandparents, Abram and Mary, and my great-grandparents, Ruby and Bernett. I'm really curious about the story of my great-grandfather, Bernett's disappearance. This was in Paducah.
Paducah.
Right.
Everything was in Paducah that we know of.
Since we got something to go on, I think we can go into ancestry.com just to see what information is there and if it kind of ties into what we have.
All right.
Let's see what happens here.
Let's find out here.
Or the death records. Oh, we have something here.
Crackett County.
Certificate of death for a Bernell Bogard, but that's spelled different. B-E-A-U-G-A-R-D, where we spell it B-O-U-G-A-R-D.
Right.
We know he died in Paducah.
Yeah.
And it says Bernell.
Yeah, this says Bernell, and his name is Bernett.
Bernett. Somebody just forgetting to cross the T's.
That's true.
But I will check on that. I will check on that too. It says his father is an Abe Bogard.
Abe Bogard.
Abe. There are some great clues on this death certificate. Bernett must have named his son Abram after his father, my great-great-grandfather, Abe. I believe I have the right Bernett, but if he was still in Paducah when he died, why is the story that he disappeared? And what kind of person was he?
I know he was kind of a rebel guy down there, and I knew he fathered Dad and his two sisters, but after then, I have no idea whatever happened, and Dad didn't talk a lot about him.
Yeah, so that leaves a lot of room in there as to what happened.
Exactly.
We don't know what.
We don't know.
Mom has definitely raised a lot of questions for me, and I can't wait to get started. Since the trail went cold with Bernett's death in Paducah, Kentucky, I'm headed there to begin my investigation. I'm meeting with historian Dr. Gerald Smith at the McCracken County Courthouse. Jerome Bettis.
Gerald Smith.
Where he's already started doing some research for me on my great-grandparents, Ruby and Bernett.
Well, I believe I have something that will help you out, and you might want to take a look at this. This is a divorce record dated August 26 of 1921.
So that there was an actual divorce?
Yes.
Okay. Ruby Beauregard versus Bernett Beauregard. Let me ask you a question. When I looked on the death certificate, it was a Bogard. Here, there's a Ruby Beauregard and Bernett Beauregard.
Yeah, it's quite common because record keepers often focused more on the sound of a last name than making sure the spelling was correct. Another reality is the fact that there were some census takers and others who just simply intentionally misspelled the names of African Americans because, in their view, blacks were irrelevant.
So we were second-class citizens, kind of.
Exactly.
Man. plaintiff states since their marriage in about the year of 1919, the defendant abandoned her for more than 1 year. Wow.
Jerome Bettis is in Paducah, Kentucky, exploring his mother's ancestry. He wants to find out the details behind the family story that his great-grandfather, Bernett Bogard, disappeared. Jerome just discovered that in 1921, his great-grandmother Ruby filed for divorce from her husband Bernett, citing abandonment as the cause.
What killed me here is abandonment. That is just like, wow.
Bernett had abdicated his responsibilities as a husband and as a father, so the legal term used was abandonment.
Wow.
On the second page of this petition, we find the deposition of one of the witnesses on behalf of Ruby Beauregard.
State if you know the cause of the separation. And the answer is the man just went off and left her and told her she could have the house. Wow. Now I know he didn't disappear. There was a divorce, and Bernett left Ruby, who raised Abram and his sisters, alone. That would have made my grandfather about 6 years old at the time, so I'm sure that left some real bad scars, and probably why my grandfather didn't really speak of him to my mother and her brother.
Right.
Okay. Help me also on one other myth or story that kind of was going around that my mother really told me about, and it was that he was a rebel or one of those guys who really kind of got into maybe some trouble or that kind of thing.
If that was true, the likely source for this information would be the criminal court records or police arrest reports.
Okay.
I haven't found anything in those sources. There's a possibility that something may be in the local newspapers, so I would suggest that you check there.
Okay. All right, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right.
When I read the divorce filings and it said that Bernett had abandoned Ruby, it really shocked me because, you know, how could a man leave his wife and his young children? It really leaves me questioning the type of person Bernett was. To find some answers, Gerald suggested I try searching some newspapers from the time when Bernett was in Paducah. I'm meeting with Professor Barry Craig at the McCracken County Public Library. Barry, I've been doing some research on my great-grandfather, Bernett. There was a rumor that he was a rebel rouser or that type of guy, and I was wondering if there was something that could help answer that question from maybe a newspaper article of that day.
You're very fortunate. This library has internet connection to the Library of Congress, and they have got Kentucky newspapers going way back. So let's give this a shot.
Bernett Bogard, B-O-U-G-A-R-D. I get nothing here, so I would try B-E-A-U-R-E-G-A-R-D.
Well,
there we go. The Paducah Daily Sun, April 6, 1897. Wow.
So if you'll give me a second, I'll get the microfilm and we'll put it on that machine and see what we can find.
Okay.
All right, now we'll thread this thing.
Looking for Bernett. Okay. Okay, here it is. Let's see it. It says, struck with a spoke. A colored boy swears out a warrant. Bernett Beauregard, a colored boy employed at Little Spoke Factory, swore out a warrant for Kosh Little. He said the latter struck him in the head with a spoke, and he had a bleeding wound under his hat. It appears they had a few words over the boy's work. His boss hit him over the head?
That's what it looks like.
Wow. And swore out a warrant? Does that mean he was pressing charges against his boss?
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
That took a lot of guts because in this era, this sort of thing can really be dangerous. I mean, there were lynchings in this county.
Unbelievable.
Jerome Bettis is in Paducah, Kentucky with Professor Barry Craig. he just discovered that in 1897, his great-grandfather Bernett pressed charges against his boss for assault.
1897, this would make him 21 years old, but yet they refer to him as a colored boy.
That is a derogatory term that whites used against African Americans going back to slavery days. You could be 60 years old and they would still call you boy. Paducah was part of the Jim Crow South. Segregation and race discrimination were the law.
After the Civil War ended in 1865, Congress amended the Constitution prohibiting slavery, making blacks full citizens and granting freed black men the right to vote. It was a glorious moment, but it wouldn't last. As the Union Army pulled out of the defeated South, Southern states found ways to circumvent the federal legislation. They enacted the Jim Crow laws, which legalized segregation in public places and prevented black citizens from voting, thus reversing many advances toward equality made by African Americans in the post-Civil War era. When 21-year-old Bernett Bogard bravely stood up for his rights in 1897, the odds were heavily against him.
What do you think came of this situation with Bernett?
Well, let's just go a few days forward, see what turns up.
Okay. Here it is. It says, the case against Cos Little, charged with striking Bernett Beauregard, colored, with the spoke, was dismissed. The evidence showed that the darky advanced in a threatening manner towards Mr. Little. Darky.
Oh yeah, unfortunately, that's very typical of that era, yes. Now, under Kentucky law, an African American could swear out a warrant, but the deck is stacked against him. Remember, slavery ended in Kentucky just 32 years before. Violence against African Americans was tragically common in this period. There were lynchings in this county. For him to have the courage to go to City Hall and to swear out a warrant is pretty amazing.
Wow. So he was a bit of a rebel from the looks of it. So this really helps me because with the divorce that I saw earlier, coupled with this rumor that he was this rebel rouser, I was starting to develop a negative perception. And now, I don't think that applies. I think he was a strong-willed African-American man in a time that you really couldn't be a strong-willed African-American man. It's amazing how much information I've been able to find on Bernett, and I'd love to see how much farther up the Bogard tree I can go. I do know of his father, Abe Bogard. Don't know much about him, but I would love to see if we can kind of find some information on Abe Bogard.
Well, let's, again, try the database and see what we come up with.
Okay. Okay, here we go. October 8th, 1902. Here it is here. Abe Bogard has filed suit in the circuit court against the Illinois Central for $2,000 in damages for injuries received by being struck by a Illinois Central train while walking along the track. He's suing the railroad for $2,000.
It's about, what, $48,000 or so today?
Wow.
That's a huge amount of money. So here you've got a guy taking on this giant corporation. That takes quite a bit of guts, too.
Wow, that says a lot. Is there any way that we can find out what happened? Can I find out?
Your best bet there is to go to Frankfort, to the Kentucky State Archives. That's where they have the circuit court records.
Knowing that Abe actually sued a railroad company for $2,000 is really intriguing to me. So I'm on my way to Frankfort, the capital of Kentucky. There's a couple questions that I hope to get answered about my great-great-grandfather. One, what was he doing on the railroad tracks in the first place? And was he even successful in his suit? I'm going to meet with Jennifer Frazier, and hopefully she can enlighten me a little bit more about Abe Bogard. I've been doing some research on my lineage, and I'm going all the way back to my great-great-grandfather, Abe Bogard, and I found there was a suit that he filed against the Illinois Central Railroad. I wanted to try to find out what happened with this suit.
Well, we're gonna have to slip on our white gloves.
Okay.
We've got original case documents. It's 100 years old.
Okay,
So
gotcha.
the first document to look at is the petition. Petition is the first document that is filed in the court to get the case started.
The plaintiff, Abe Bogard, says that the defendant carelessly, recklessly, and wrongfully ran its engine and train upon and against plaintiff. He has been damaged in the sum of $2,000. Wow. Abe Bogard. This is signature?
Well, it says his mark.
His mark?
Yep.
My great-great-grandfather, his signature is X?
Yes, I think that he probably couldn't write, and so someone else wrote his name, and then he put the X, and that's his mark.
That's sad. It's just disturbing. That's something. You just, excuse me, because as I'm reading this, it popped out at me, and it's striking because it brings in the reality that this was a man that was probably involved in slavery, and he couldn't write his name. And he's fighting a huge railroad at this time.
Yes.
It's amazing.
The Illinois Central Railroad was a huge railroad. It was the biggest employer in Paducah. It was one of the biggest railroads at the time.
Okay.
And they had the lawyers and the money to fight every single case. They would take cases all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court if they could.
How can he afford, I mean, these type of lawyers, they couldn't come cheap.
Well, Hendrick and Miller, who represented your great-great-grandfather, were very prominent attorneys in Western Kentucky. They probably believed in the populist ideology, which was the common man versus the elite. And they probably took this case without charging or charged a very minimal fee.
Gotcha. Do we know how this case went?
Abe's lawyers actually got it to trial. Now, this would have been an all-white jury. Jurors were picked through tax records, and you had to be a landowner of good reputation in the community.
Not good for Abe.
Not good for Abe. And one of the things that the railroad claimed was that Abe was trespassing. He wasn't an employee, and he wasn't a passenger. He was a trespasser. So Abe and his attorneys filed this reply.
Plaintiff denies it was negligence in him to go upon defendant's track and says he was there by the invitation and with the knowledge of the defendant. Prior to this date, he had been in the employ of the defendant. So Abe is claiming that he used to work for the railroad and had been invited to the station to talk about returning to work and just kind of got the okay to come back to work, and he gets struck. And if that's the case, he wasn't trespassing.
Well, that's actually the issue the jury had to decide. They had to decide whether they believed Abe or whether or not to believe his employers, the railroad company.
I think I know what this all-white jury is thinking.
All right. On the back of this document is the jury verdict.
Okay.
Jerome Bettis is in Frankfort, Kentucky, on the trail of his great-great-grandfather, Abe Bogard. He just discovered that in 1904, Abe was in the midst of a lawsuit against the Illinois Central Railroad after being struck by one of their trains. Jerome is at the state archives to find out the verdict in the case.
On the back of this document is the jury verdict.
Okay. We, the undersigned jurors, find for the plaintiff. Wow. For the plaintiff. And fix the damages by $375. Wow. He actually won.
He won.
I would have, in a million years, never have thought, I mean, everything was stacked against him. Yeah. Everything. Man, this is a huge, huge victory for Abe. My goodness. To think an all-white jury believed him.
Believed him.
That means a lot. It means that, this was a man of integrity. They saw past race, and that's amazing in and of itself. But he didn't get the $2,000.
No, he didn't get it all, but that's about a year's pay.
Oh, wow.
And this was also a huge deal regarding labor disputes, because even if a white man had won this dispute against the railroad, for a black man to win, it's just really phenomenal.
Wow, that's amazing. I'm so intrigued now. Would you have any more information here about Abe?
I don't have anything else on Abe here, but I have found somebody in Paducah who used to work for the railroad, and he actually remembers hearing about Abe's case. So I have arranged for you to go back to Paducah and talk to him.
Back to Paducah.
Back to Paducah, yes.
Back to Paducah. I am tremendously proud of Abe. He was willing to fight in what he believed in. He was willing to go toe-to-toe with the giant railroad company. It just tells me what type of man he really was. I'm headed to the Paducah Railroad Museum to speak to former Illinois Central Railroad employee and local historian John Robertson. I can't wait to hear what he remembers about my great-great-grandfather Abe.
Well, see, I started on the railroad in 1947.
Okay.
And when I started working, we had quite a few people who were way up in their 70s. And so to them, it was still fresh in their mind. And so it was passed on to my generation. The way I heard it, he felt he got a raw deal. And so he sued, and the remarkable thing is that he won. And that resonated with the workers. This man against the monster, the big steam engine, not only that, but against the railroad.
This is just amazing to hear.
Have you ever seen a steam locomotive like we're talking about?
Maybe on TV.
On TV. I think really for you to appreciate that, we need to walk out and take a look at one of them.
Let's go take a look.
Can you imagine that coming down at you?
I could not imagine that bearing down on you. I mean, it's so huge. It's incredible to think that, this machine, it knocked him down, but he was still strong enough to get back up, but also a strong will in the sense that, you know what, I'm gonna fight this train company, I'm gonna sue them, and I'm gonna actually win. Playing football, I took some big hits for a living, but to think that my great-great-grandfather took a shot like that from that train and actually got up and was willing to stand up for what he believed in, it really made me impressed. I'm starting to develop a pretty good picture of who my great-great-grandfather was, but I'm still really curious about his signature, the mark that was his name. So I'm headed back to my hotel to search for more clues about my great-great-grandfather and to try to find out whether or not he was born a slave. Search. Birth, marriage, death. Abe Bogard. Location, it's death. Cracken County, Kentucky. Let's see what we got here. Abe Bogard's death certificate. Death, November 4th, 1925. Male, colored, married. Date of birth, don't know. Wow, okay. That gives me what I'm thinking in terms of slavery. You probably would know. Age, about 72. He died in 1925. So that would put him about 1853. That's right at the end of slavery. Abe probably was born into slavery. Okay. Name of father, Jerry. That's crazy because the nickname for Jerome is Jerry. Birthplace, don't know. Maiden name of mother, Eliza. Okay, Eliza. Last name, don't know. Okay. I found my great-great-grandfather Abe Bogard's death certificate, and on there were my great-great-great-grandparents Jerry and Liza, with no last names listed. Since my great-great-grandfather Abe and his parents were alive prior to emancipation, I think I'm getting closer to confirming my ancestors' link to slavery. but I want to know for sure.
All right, I got some work to do.
Jerome Bettis just learned that his great-great-grandfather, Abe Bogard, and Abe's parents, Jerry and Liza, lived in Kentucky prior to emancipation. He wants to find out for certain if his ancestors were slaves. So Jerome is heading to Murray, Kentucky, where Professor of African American History, Dr. John Harden, has been doing some research into the family.
Would there be any information that you can help me with in regards to Jerry and Eliza? They're my great-great-great-grandparents, no last name. So that tells me, I think, that they were slaves, and I was trying to find out if I could confirm that.
Well, one of the things to remember is that typically slaves would take the names of their slave owners. And there's a slave owner here in Callaway County, Joseph Bogard, that might be a good candidate for this. I'm going to go look for those records, and I'll be right back.
Okay. I want to know the truth, but it's sobering to think I may have found the man who owned my ancestors, and that my family name actually came from him. Okay.
Wow. First thing we're going to look at is an index of slave owners.
Okay.
Let's search the index and see if we can find the will of Joseph Bogard.
What is that? Bogard, Joseph Bogard. Wow.
484?
484.
Let's move this index aside. Let's go to the will book. See if we can go to page 484.
Okay.
And find it.
484.
Let's just sort of read through this will and see what you can find.
I, Joseph Bogard, of the county of Callaway and state of Kentucky, bequeath to my beloved wife, Mary Bogard, during her natural life, the tract of land, the 1/2 of my stock of horses, hogs, and sheep. Also, my Negro boy, Jerry, and my girl, Eliza, all of which at her death is to be equally divided among my children. 29th of May, 1841. Wow. My great-great-great-grandfather and grandmother, Jerry and Eliza, were slaves, and they're being passed down in a will as property.
Right.
And that's, you know, that's despicable. They went from being people to property.
Right.
Now, I know 1841, it would be before Abram's birth, but would he be in any of these type of documents?
In order to do this, we're going to have to look up something called the dower list of slaves. This is a slave dower list. So let's open this up and take a look at it. After 1844, widows of slave owners were supposed to report to the clerk every year all of their slaves, and this would reflect the slaves that Mary Bogard would inherit.
Got a Bogard, I got a Mary Bogard. The following is a list of all of the slaves held by Mary Bogard, widow of Joseph Bogard. One male slave named Jerry, aged about 40 years, worth about $.
That simply meant that the slave had value, but there's no specific dollar. They simply had to report that the slave was worth something and was still there.
One female slave named Eliza, aged around 35 years. One male slave named Abram, aged about 4. It's disturbing. So, you know, it's pretty clear here he's 4 years old, which means he was born into slavery.
Abe and Jerry and Eliza crop up in the dower list up to 1860, and we don't see them after that.
Well, what do you think happened?
By 1860, Mary Bogard died, and they would have to divide up the property. I found another court record that can help us.
Okay.
I think we start right here.
It says, deed to the heirs of Joseph Bogard. October 5th, 1860, sold at public auction among said heirs, the following Negroes being all that belonged to the estate of Joseph and Mary Bogard. H.A. Bogard became the purchaser of Jerry and Eliza, and F.A. Hand bought Abram at $1,363. Wow. Whoa. It's disturbing in a number of different ways. One, there's a price, $1,363. That's all my great-great-grandfather was worth. But also, he was 10 years old, and he's being separated from his parents. And I think to my family and myself at 10 years old, to be separated from my mother and father, I mean, I don't think I can imagine having to do that. And even worse, as a father myself, that would destroy me. That really would, to think that, I couldn't raise my children. Wow.
I've located the property where Abe lived until he was 10 years old. Do you want to go see it?
Oh, let's go.
Let's go.
Let's go. Definitely. When I heard that Abe was sold off at auction at 10 years old, being separated from his parents, it's unimaginable. It's heart-wrenching knowing that Abe had to go through that pain and that his parents, Jerry and Eliza, had to watch their son being taken away. I want to see where they lived. I want to walk on the same land that my great-great-grandfather walked, and also walk on that same land that my great-great-great-grandfather walked, and understand what they had to go through. So this is the spot.
This is the spot where Abe lived until he was 10.
Wow. To actually stand here on the spot like this, it's surreal because my ancestors, they worked this land,
yes.
They lived on this land, and ultimately they were sold on this land. So standing here and knowing what happened here, it's one of those moments that you never forget in your life. Now, Abe gets auctioned off when he's 10 in 1860, and emancipation happened in 1865. My question is there any way of ever knowing that he actually was reunited with his mother and father?
Jerome Bettis is in Callaway County, Kentucky. He is hoping to learn whether his great-great-grandfather, Abe, who was sold away from his parents when he was just 10 years old, ever saw his family again. It's a question Dr. John Harden came prepared to answer.
What we have here is an 1870 census for this area. I want you to look at that and tell me what you see.
Jerry Bogard, Mary, Abram. Wow. In 1870, they were together. This is great news. This is incredible. They were a family again. It really brings me a sense of joy and a sense of thankfulness because Abe was reunited with his father. It's a relief, but it also reminds me of what my ancestors had to go through, the struggle. I definitely think some of the strength in the Bogard name was born on that day, on that field, when my great-great-grandfather Abe Bogard was sold. Because at that point, he had to grow up and be a man. And that's a very frightening and difficult thing to do at 10 years old. But my great-great-grandfather, he did it. And I really believe that helped shape the life that he lived in a no-compromising, never-give-up attitude that he had. I cannot wait to get back to Detroit to explain all of the things that I found to my mother and to my uncle. They're going to be so surprised. When I think about the the strong Bogart men, I think about Bernett. He was willing to put everything on the line for justice. And his father, Abe, knowing that the odds were stacked against him, he was relentless in his pursuit of justice. So when I think about the Bogart men, I see the strength in all of their stories, and it makes me proud to be a Bogart man. When I left here, the big question was Bernett.
Yes.
Did he disappear, or what happened, right? There was actually no disappearance. There was a divorce.
Oh.
And he later died in Paducah in 1925. Oh. So we do know that. And I was not only able to find out about my great-grandfather, but I was able to find out about my great-great-grandfather, Abe, and my great-great-great-grandfather, Jerry.
Wow.
To see documents and see paperwork with Abe, my great-great-grandfather, that was extraordinary. Not only did Abe sue, but he actually won.
Yes, we won.
Okay.
Bogart men had that kind of strength.
Absolutely.
My God.
Butch, when you spoke about that fist, I saw it. I saw it with my own eyes.
Yeah. Did you?
I was so proud to have Bogart blood running through my veins. Yeah. It was special. It was.
I guess that means we got to go to Paducah.
Yeah, we gotta go.
Yeah, it's a trip that we need to make.
Yeah.
And I'll drive the bus.
I definitely accomplished everything that I really set out to find on this journey. I'm just so thankful for the wealth of knowledge that I'm able to give to my family, and I think that's the most important gift that you can give.
No matches. I know what happened, I think. Should I put in Roberts?
Let's give it a try.
I see her. That I don't like that she had to get rid of Rothenberg. I'm assuming that she was escaping some kind of subtle or overt anti-Semitism. Is that a good assumption or a bad assumption?
That's a good assumption.
Probably you don't change from Rothenberg to Roberts for any other reason.
Accomplished actor, director, and screenwriter Helen Hunt has worked on more than 80 films, TV shows, and Broadway plays in a career that began in childhood. She rose to fame playing Jamie on NBC's hit show Mad About You, a role that earned her 4 Emmys. For her performance in the feature As Good as It Gets, Helen won an Academy Award and the honor of being the second woman ever to earn an Emmy, Oscar, and Golden Globe in the same year. Helen lives in Los Angeles with her partner Matthew Carnahan, her stepson Emmett Carnahan, and daughter McKenna Lay.
I was born here. I don't know that much about generations before, but I have parents from here and grandparents who lived here. And I have heard more about my mother's parents, maybe because my mother, like me, is a talker and a seeker of those things. My mother's like me in that she's interested in photographs and records. And on my father's side, maybe I don't know if he's less that way, or I'm sure some of it has to do with the fact that his mother died when he was so young. My dad's mother was killed by a drunk driver, I was told, when he was 5, which is hard to even talk about, even though I didn't know her. I was named after her, and am incredibly close to my father, and his siblings, actually. So the thought of them going through that at such a young age, especially, as I started to raise my daughter and really, could imagine what that would mean. He didn't have a mother to say, here are the photographs, and here's what happened, and here's what my mother was like, and my father and my grandmother. So I'm doing this for my daughter. Time is speeding up as I get older. So I want her to have, something in her hand to know where she's from. So I'm scrapbooking for my life. Since I already know a good deal about my mom's family, I want to explore my dad's side of the family. I've heard we have European Jewish roots and ancestors from the East Coast. I'd like to find out more about that. I'm meeting with my father, Gordon, here in Los Angeles to see if he has any clues to start me off on my journey.
So, here we are.
This I've never seen.
I love that picture.
It's amazing.
And there's my
Helen
mother,
and-
Helen, and there's my grandmother, the power behind the throne, Florence Roberts.
So I remember hearing that name.
Yeah.
And then when did Rothenberg become Roberts? I mean, I know it has to do with their Jewishness, but was it when they came to New York?
I don't know the when of that.
And her husband, you never knew?
No. She and her husband were immigrants from, I think, Germany, and they emigrated through New York and then ended up living in Pasadena. The building still stands, called the Green Hotel.
And they lived in a hotel because they could?
That's exactly
Wow.
right, because they could.
Where did the money come from?
Don't know. I would like to find out someday.
I'm heading to Pasadena, California, where Florence's old home, what used to be the Hotel Green, still stands. My dad's mother, Helen, lived there with my great-grandmother, Florence Roberts. So I'm here meeting with Mark Dollinger, a professor of Jewish American history. I've asked him to do some research on my ancestors, who my dad thinks are from New York. Hello. And I want to find out how my great-grandmother had enough money that she could actually choose to live in a hotel. I grew up knowing Florence's name and that she lived in this hotel. There was a Rothenberg to Roberts thing that I always knew growing up and was kind of interested in why that was. I asked my dad about his grandfather and he didn't know much about.
Let's see where they were in 1900. And if we do a search on ancestry.com, and let's see, we're going to search for census records, and we're going to look for 1900.
Florence Rothenberg.
Let's search in New York.
Is that it?
That's it.
Okay, Gustav. That's my great-grandfather, right?
So this, yeah.
Florence, Alfred, Edwin, not Edward, and Paul. Helen, and there she is.
And if you look underneath Helen's name,
I can barely read
Rose.
it. Rose.
And after Rose's name,
I can't read it.
Servant.
Oh, goodness.
And then Anne, servant. Mary, Delia.
One for each child. Wow.
So we can conclude that they were quite well off.
Right.
So actually, I have a document to show you.
Death record for Gustav Rothenberg. Intestinal and gastric hemorrhage.
Yeah, related to typhoid fever.
Typhoid fever. That 1900, oh my God. So I wonder, is that when Florence moved to Pasadena?
Let's do another search for Florence.
Pasadena. Okay. Florence Rothenberg.
So in 1910, they're in Pasadena, which means after the death of her husband.
She goes 3,000 miles.
With 4 young kids.
Is there any clue about that?
Helen Hunt is in Pasadena, California, hoping to uncover more of her great-grandmother's story. She just found out that her great-grandfather, Gustav, died in 1900, leaving his wife a young widow with 4 kids. Helen wants to know how this single mother, Florence Rothenberg, fared on her own, moving 3,000 miles away from New York.
Why don't you stay in New York where your synagogue is, I wonder?
We don't know precisely
Maybe she
why
was
she
cold.
picked Pasadena, but we know a lot of other people made the same decision. The Jewish population in Los Angeles between 1900 and 1915 increased 8 times.
Wow.
It was huge growth, and Pasadena was also high society. Shall we see how she progressed?
Yes.
Okay, let's do an Ancestry.com search for the 1920 census.
No matches. I know what happened, I think. Should I put in Roberts?
Let's give it a try.
see her, that I don't like that she had to get rid of Rothenberg. I'm assuming that she was escaping some kind of subtle or overt anti-Semitism. Is that a good assumption or a bad assumption?
That's a good assumption.
Probably you don't change from Rothenberg to Roberts for any other reason.
Due to famine, war, and persecution in the late 1800s, Jewish refugees were fleeing Europe by the millions, among a wave of more than 20 million newcomers to America over just 4 decades. Many native-born Americans feared this group, and in 1921, Congress indirectly targeted Jews by passing a law limiting the number of immigrants allowed to enter the U.S. These events fueled a spike in anti-Semitism that also impacted Jews already in America, who were suddenly facing discrimination themselves.
It would be a lot more challenging to go through life as a Rothenberg than it would as a Roberts.
Word restricted suddenly becomes a part of your life.
So we learned before that Gustav died young, and what I have here for you is the certificate of death of Florence.
86 years old. So she lived a long life.
This is a very important historical document for us, most of all because it gives us information on her father.
William Shawley.
Your great-great-grandfather.
Shawley, I didn't even know that name till right now at all.
Through some research, we were in fact able to find an 1845 passenger ship manifest.
Oh my gosh.
From Bavaria,
Germany,
to New York City.
Is he on there?
His name was a little different, as was often the case. Went by the name Wolf.
Wolf
Shawley. Wolf is a typical German language name, and William certainly sounds much more American.
So I just found out that my great-great-grandfather, Wolf Shawley, who became William, was the one who came over from Germany. So the question remains, where did William's or Florence's money come from?
As you can see here, Wolf Shawley begins as a farmer. Economic depression was hitting in this time period, and as was typically the case, they would move into the cities looking for work or greater economic opportunity.
So do we know what William did when he got to America?
Well, in 1853, City of New York provides us with the business directory.
So William.
There's William.
Oh, and does that say Abraham? So there's an Abraham.
Abraham is William's big brother.
Oh, here we go. Abraham Clothing.
That's right.
William Clothing. Shawley and Brother Clothing. They're on Bowery Street. I know Bowery Street. Wait a minute. What happened? William is in San Francisco. Why?
Your great-great-grandfather, William, arrived at an incredibly fortuitous time, because within just a few years, from 1848 to 1850, when they're establishing themselves in New York, gold is discovered in the foothills of California's Sierra Nevada.
Fantastic.
And your great-great-grandfather, William, was very well positioned to join the gold rush.
Do we know what made him well positioned?
He acquired enough language skills, and he had enough of a business foundation to afford the journey to the West.
Wow. No idea. I had absolutely no idea. I know nothing about the gold rush, so if that's actually where I'm headed, I will be learning a lot. I love San Francisco, but I didn't know that that was an important place in my family. It's a little tiny clue, but it means something. I'm now hot on the trail of my great-great-grandfather William, who moved west at the time of the gold rush. So I'm on my way to Northern California to see what else I can discover about him. So I'm on the Bay Bridge going into San Francisco. Many times I've been, but as a child I remember seeing it and thinking it was among the most beautiful things I'd ever seen. But I had no idea that anybody in my family had any particular connection to it. Mark Dollinger suggested I meet with Professor Stephen Aaron, an expert in the American West. We're meeting at the San Francisco Public Library.
Hi, I'm Steve Aaron.
I've asked Stephen to investigate my great-great-grandfather for me. I want to know if William Shawley made his fortune from the gold rush. I was shown a list of merchants that showed William here, and there was talk of gold rush
Okay.
That's everything I know.
Okay.
And I know nothing about the gold rush.
Well, he came, we know that he does come to California in the early 1850s, because if you can look here, you'll see this is the first census of California in 1852.
The first census.
California becomes a state in 1850,
Right.
right on the heels of the gold rush. And
Is that him?
that is him. San Francisco had been a small village before gold sort of happened. But quickly on the heels, thousands rush in.
Beginning in 1848, the promise of gold lured throngs from around the world to San Francisco. The population rocketed, turning the sleepy seaside town into a thriving international seaport almost overnight. Merchants sought to take advantage of new opportunities that gold and the population boom presented. While miners searched for gold, savvy businessmen like William Shawley sought their own fortunes, supplying, clothing, and feeding them. But success here was by no means a sure bet. Competition was fierce, logistics difficult, and rampant crime threatened the surging city.
And is there any way to know how struggling or well off he was?
Yeah, if you look at this newspaper.
My gosh.
Helen Hunt is in San Francisco, where she's just discovered that her great-great-grandfather made the daring decision to open a branch of his clothing business during the rough and tumble gold rush era. She's speaking with historian Stephen Aaron, hoping to find out how William Shawley fared in this wild western boomtown.
So if you look at this newspaper from 1855, you can see here in this tabulation of the weekly shipment of treasures.
Mm-hmm. Shawley Brothers. My gosh. $10,100.
So and roughly in today's terms, that's probably about $250,000. So that's a significant amount of cargo that he is engaged in. If you look then at the 1858 business directory for San Francisco.
Shawley, Jacob, and brother.
But this is the common pattern, to send the younger brothers out to sort of work together.
So William's older brother Abraham stayed in New York, and his other brother Jacob came out to San Francisco. William Shawley, manufacturers and importers of clothing.
They're now declaring themselves not just as importers of goods. Mm-hmm. They've branched out and they seem to be engaged now, at least in some manufacturing enterprise. Mm-hmm. Obviously from these we know that they're doing well enough, which is no easy feat. Mm-hmm. So here's another census, the 1870 census.
Mm-hmm. William Shawley, right?
Yeah,
and Rosa. I don't know who that is.
That is his wife.
Ah, Albert, Mamie, Florence, who is my great-grandmother, Clara, age 6, my God. And that says Adolf?
Right, but in the same household here.
Oh, this is all in the same household.
This is the same household, so you can see also.
Anne, Sophia, and what's this last name? Walsh?
Walsh.
Willis. Domestic servant. So they're doing okay.
So they've got 3 domestic servants.
Their servants, my people.
In fact, here they are.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh. Okay, there's William Shawley.
There's William.
Wow. And then Rosa. There she is.
That's Florence.
Just incredible to see that.
We have one more document over here that I think you'll find fascinating. If you can help me open this very big book.
Oh my God.
Yeah, okay. You can see this is the San Francisco newspaper.
September 28th, 1874.
This might come in handy. Take a look right here.
It's sad, both things. There we go. The Solid Men. The following is a carefully prepared list of individuals and firms in San Francisco whose reputed wealth exceeds $1 million. The individual towers of strength are Michael Reese, D.O. Mills, A. Hayward, Levi Strauss, Louis Strauss, Jacob Shawley, William Shawley. Oh my God. They're zillionaires. Wow.
Really, when you think about it, this is 1874, so this is 20 plus years after he first got here.
And what were
William
they
Shawley-
made of that they thought they could do it? That they thought even maybe they could do it?
Right.
It's quite incredible.
I mean, this was the dream that brought so many hundreds of thousands of people here. They came for gold.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, William Shawley, he found the gold.
Mm-hmm. I guess by any measure, it's utterly remarkable. Certainly seems like a literally rags to riches story in this case. We knew there was money in Pasadena. So now I guess the money and the California part of that makes more sense. So you just feel like little parts of you are waking up. Stephen suggested I talk to Frances Dinkelspiel, a writer who has traced her own roots to 19th century San Francisco. Frances told me she would be able to fill me in on the rest of my great-great-grandfather's rise to success. We're meeting at the old San Francisco Mint, a historic financial institution.
So I wanted to show you something. This is a story from the New York Times, Sunday, February 16th, 1890.
The Nevada Bank to be sold. Negotiations have been going on recently between the present proprietors and a syndicate composed of the following wealthy capitalists: Levi Strauss, Shawley Brothers, Louis Schloss, and Hellman's bankers at Los Angeles.
So there are two names in there. One, of course, is of William Shawley, who is your great-great-grandfather. And here's a picture of another man on that list. His name is Isaiah Hellman, and he is my great-great-grandfather.
No!
Yes.
Oh my God!
So our great-great-grandfathers were friends.
Rich friends.
Rich friends, and they were business partners.
My goodness, that's amazing.
So when word got out, millionaires lined up from all over the country trying to get shares of stock in the Nevada Bank. And here is a list of some of the people who invested in the Nevada Bank.
Does that say Lehman Brothers?
Mm-hmm.
Shawley Brothers.
So Helen, do you ever hear today about the Nevada Bank?
No.
So let me show you another article.
My God.
Helen Hunt is with Frances Dinkelspiel, who's just told Helen that their great-grandfathers helped bail out the failing Nevada Bank. But there's even more to the story.
Let me show you another article. This is also from the New York Times.
Wells Fargo and Nevada institutions will become one at close of today's business. They became Wells Fargo.
Right.
My God.
So what happened
I'm gonna
was...
strut around here now when I walk down the streets of San Francisco.
That's right.
It's incredible. It's incredible.
This document shows that your family, the Shawley brothers, were part creators of an institution that is now spread across the country that millions and millions of Americans bank at.
That's amazing.
It's something that's sort of not well known in history, how this group of Bavarian Jews came and sort of really dug themselves in and said, this is our country now, we're going to make it a success and we're going to dedicate everything to it.
Right. Wow, thank you so much. My daughter loves a good story. And so the idea that I can say your great-great-great-grandfather lived in Germany and came here when there was nothing, it's just hard to imagine. But I feel like she'll have a better shot at understanding what it means to be American, because of that story. I was very surprised and impressed by Florence and William's stories. Now I really want to dig into my father's side of the family, the Hunts, and see what I can learn about my great-great-grandfather, George Hunt I. My dad told me my great-great-grandfather was from Portland, Maine, so I'm heading there to begin my investigation. I've only been in Portland, Maine one other time. I was working in a small town about an hour and a half outside of Portland, and I was only 7 weeks pregnant, not wanting anybody to know because I was so worried that something would happen. And so I had a friend who knew a doctor, and we heard her heartbeat, my daughter's heartbeat, for the first time here, Portland, Maine. All I know about George Hunt is that he was a businessman and traded goods, but what did he trade and who was his family? I've asked local historian Herb Adams to look into George and see if he can help me sort it all out. We're meeting at a pub in the same neighborhood where he says my great-great-grandfather once worked. Nice
Pleased
see
to
you.
meet you.
You too.
Welcome to Portland.
Thank you. The little bit that I know, if I have it right, is that my great-great-grandfather was from here, and something about trading.
Well, as it turns out, your great-great-grandfather, who lived in this town, George S. Hunt, was a major sugar importer and exported a lot of wood in those days. Can't grow sugar in Maine, I assure you. But we had plenty of wood, and that made his fortune, that exchange. This comes from a publication called Representative Businessmen of Portland, Maine. And his biography, and as much about the company as him, is right there.
This company was incorporated in 1863, located on West Commercial Street, which is a block from here, right?
Just about.
Right. According to this biography, in the mid-1800s, my great-great-grandfather, George Hunt, was an extremely successful businessman who traded lumber for sugar with the Caribbean. Our facilities for the manufacture of sugar should be so extensive and efficient as to be unequaled by those possessed by any other nation. Cool. I had no idea sugar was a thing in my family.
It would interest you, I thought, to see this.
George S. Hunt, one of the most prominent and enterprising of the Portland citizens, died very suddenly in the office at 4 o'clock this afternoon. Mr. Hunt leaves a widow who was very well known in educational circles and 2 sons. On September 22nd, 1863, he married Augusta, youngest daughter of the late George Barstow, a well-known and prominent resident of Portland. Wow.
Your great-great-grandmother, Augusta, the wife of the man we've been speaking about, appears in this document, which is sort of the woman's equivalent of the Representative Businessmen's publication.
Augusta M. Hunt is a graceful speaker and is identified with various educational and philanthropic institutions. As president of the Home for Aged Women and the Women's Christian Temperance Union, and of the Ladies' History Club, she has proved herself a wise and efficient leader. I'm guessing she was anti-rum.
You made a good guess. Right up until about 1850, Portland, Maine probably drank more rum than any other seaport in the United States. The one great 19th century reform that is a Maine reform is the anti-alcohol crusade.
And that started in Maine.
It started in this town, not far from where you're sitting now.
In the 19th century, the rise of cheap sugar, the same commodity being traded by George Hunt before his death, also led to a surge in the availability of rum and other spirits, especially in New England. 1830 marked the peak of U.S. per capita alcohol consumption, even to today. At one time, in a 1-mile stretch of Portland, some 300 establishments sold liquor. In an effort to curtail rampant drinking, the Maine Law of 1851 was enacted, prohibiting the production and sale of alcohol. This law made it unlikely that George Hunt's company provided sugar to the rum makers.
This was a national organization which still exists in Portland, Maine.
Wow. I think pretty sure the Christian Temperance Society was, I don't know what it was. Makes me want to go have something warm with rum in it.
Helen Hunt is in Portland, Maine, investigating her great-great-grandmother Augusta Hunt's role in the temperance movement in the late 1800s.
Herb recommended I talk to Professor Carol Mattingly, who I've asked to look into how my great-great-grandmother was involved in temperance. She's asked me to meet her at the Neil Dow House, headquarters for Maine's branch of the Women's Christian Temperance Union. My great-great-grandfather traded sugar very successfully, and I learned that his wife was very active in the Women's Christian Temperance Union.
You didn't know
And
it
I've learned that it gives me a
existed.
slight bit of anxiety to say all those words pushed in together.
Why are you so nervous about this?
I don't know. Tell me more.
Okay, I'm going to tell you why I think you're nervous.
Okay.
Because the WCTU is associated with a prudish movement that failed.
Right.
The reason women joined the WCTU in such huge numbers is because alcohol abuse was so rampant in the 19th century. And the primary result women felt was the physical and sexual abuse of women and children. And so they rallied around the temperance topic.
There was a dark side to the 19th century love affair with liquor. Alcoholism spiked, even in children, and domestic violence took a steep toll on families and society as a whole. Married women like Augusta had few legal rights at the time. They couldn't vote or sign contracts, and divorcing was difficult at best. But women became a powerful force for social change when they banded together against rampant alcohol abuse and other social ills.
Well, they were all about getting voice for women.
That's amazing.
Your great-great-grandmother did the welcoming address at the 11th annual convention. If you would start reading just
Here, when we consider the well-known and sad fact that women have always been the greatest sufferer from the misery caused by intemperance, does it not seem strange that nearly 90 years of such suffering were required to reveal to women their duty upon this question? That's an amazing thing to have done.
These are pictures of your great-great-grandmother, Augusta Barstow Hunt. She was really active in the WCTU in the 1880s and 1890s, which would have been their heyday, which the organization was huge and very powerful and influential by that time. We've surmised that this might be your grandfather because these are probably her grandchildren.
And then her grandson's wife is Helen, right? My grandmother. And she was killed by a drunk driver.
Is that true?
It's just interesting to watch your own snap judgments rise up and crumble away, you know? I knew nothing about her. Then I heard she had been in these organizations. I heard the word temperance, and I have an utterly uneducated idea about what that is. And then to have it sort of blossom in this beautiful, painful way that she was involved in sort of excruciating issues. And then, you know, how my father's mother was killed, and then I have a real connection to because I've grown up with my dad and wondered or imagined or glimpsed what the effect of that was. Pretty amazing. I don't know how long she lived, so I don't know where in the span of her life this happened, you know? Was this the last thing she did? Was this the beginning? It impresses me that even as a widow with children, my great-great-grandmother, Augusta, still made it a priority to be involved in social change. Carol has sent me to see Professor Shannon Risk, who studies women's history. Shannon said she would research for me what else Augusta was able to accomplish for women's rights. I just came from the WCTU, the name of which filled me with fear and dread until I found out what they did, and then it humbled me and moved me that what they were doing was about much more than I ever bothered to learn about or imagine. So what else can you tell me about Augusta?
Not only was Augusta involved in the WCTU, we have pulled out some things about your great-great-grandmother. And the first is a biography, and it starts right here and goes on to the next page. So she was about 62 when they're writing about her.
Wow. Mrs. Hunt remained president of the Portland Women's Christian Temperance Union for 15 years. Under her direction, the Coffee House and Friendly Inn, day nursery, and free kindergartens were adopted as branches of the work of this organization. This biography says that my great-great-grandmother was instrumental in starting daycare, bringing female guards to co-ed prisons, and getting women elected to school boards. That's remarkable. Under her leadership, the council was instrumental in having a law passed which gives to a mother an equal right with a father in the care and guardianship of minor children. Wow.
So this was a way for Augusta and her cohorts to be political in a society that did not accept women in politics.
I mean, I know many women have had to choose between being present with their children and getting something done in the world that's going to affect generations and generations. So you know, to the extent that she did both at once, I think that's a big deal, actually.
It was so important to her. This work was so important. And again, they've turned outward into society.
That's huge.
As the temperance movement gained strength, women shifted their focus to larger issues, and the women's rights movement was born. Some 40 years before Augusta got involved, the movement for women's rights burst onto the national stage in 1848 with a two-day event called the Seneca Falls Convention. Here, Elizabeth Cady Stanton made international headlines by declaring that women deserved the right to vote, a shocking and controversial idea at the time. Soon after, Stanton teamed with Susan B. Anthony to focus the women's movement on this key issue: voting rights for women.
And so I want to show you this document that is the proposal from 1917 to be signed into law, they hope, giving women the right to vote.
So this is demanding that they put this up to vote.
Right. And so Augusta and her colleagues gathered thousands of signatures on petitions, and the Maine state legislature agrees, but now they must turn it out into male voting society to see what will happen.
It's thrilling and enraging all at once.
At this point, Augusta is in her mid-70s, but we know that she remains active in the fight for the women's vote. The referendum returns come back, and in most communities, they vote the resolution down. The ratio is about 2 to 1.
I think about women having daughters and having to explain that to your daughter. I mean, my daughter, I'm not looking forward to having her even begin to understand that there was a day when, you know, when women were treated differently than men were in such a huge and radical way.
Although suffrage did not pass in Maine, women were making headway elsewhere in the country. By the start of World War I, full suffrage had passed in 12 states. Women like Augusta famously mocked an address made by President Woodrow Wilson when he claimed that the Great War was a struggle for democracy. Suffragists contended that the United States was not itself a democracy since women couldn't vote. By 1918, President Wilson was swayed and began publicly supporting voting rights for women. The tide was turning, and in 1920, the 19th Amendment was ratified, at long last granting all American women the power to vote.
So we don't know a tremendous amount about her later years, but we do know that she witnessed the passing of the 19th Amendment, and we have a copy of that here.
And she was alive.
She was alive. She's about 77.
Proposing an amendment to the Constitution extending the right of suffrage to women.
She had lived to see the day.
Thank God. Did she live to vote?
This is the voter registration book
Oh my God.
from 1920. And I thought
honestly
perhaps we
afraid to-
might look for Augusta's name.
Hutchins, that's not a good sign. Am I looking in the right place?
What we're looking for is District 6.
District 6. She worked so hard for so long. This is her first chance to register to vote. Hope she's in here. Hopkins, Hubs, Hume. I don't see her.
Helen Hunt has just learned that her great-great-grandmother, Augusta Hunt, was instrumental in gaining women the right to vote. She is about to find out whether Augusta was able to achieve her dream and register to vote herself.
Hopkins, Hubs, Hume. I don't see her. Oh, wait. Augusta M. So this means she registered to vote.
After a lifetime of fighting for women's right to vote.
And these are almost all women, Delia and Catherine and Mary and Helen. And Augusta. Incredible. So she registered, but did she actually cast a ballot?
I have one last thing to show you. It is an article featured in the Portland Sunday Telegram talking about Augusta.
Mrs. George S. Hunt, identified through the years with the organization and administration of many institutions for social service, including the WCTU, of which she is a charter member, will celebrate her 90th birthday Monday. My goodness, longevity. The story of Mrs. Hunt's long and useful life is in great part a history of the development of the social agenda of the state. It was indeed fitting that she should be made the first woman member of the Lincoln Club, and that when women's suffrage was last granted, the first woman's ballot to be passed was that of Augusta. It's amazing.
It turns out that Augusta passed away 10 days after this article was published.
Her name will live long and her work will live always. That's incredible. It's very moving to see your own name reflected back at you. That alone is very moving. I mean, it's not about being first, but it took me a minute to really get, that that's a forever thing, She's forever the first one in this place to have stepped over that line. That's amazing. I say to my daughter all the time, you're a strong woman. And I mean it because she already seems strong, but, she doesn't yet know, but will now know that her great-great-great-grandmother just was part of this group of women that paved the way for everything. Definitely, if I think about hearing this daughter's heartbeat in this same place, that's a little, a tiny little woman who will vote one day. That's me.